We'd rather have you, Paul.
Yeah. I was listening to Talvin sing. I really like him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Help and sing.
Talvin sing.
What kind of music does he play?
Here's a snippet. See, it wasn't such a bad idea.
It's called
He's a tabla player. He's a tabla player, and he plays with other people, and it can get really extraordinary. This is a quiet passage.
Yeah, Zoom is cutting out the drums a little bit. Zoom is very picky what it allows you to hear.
I didn't used to listen to Talvin sing because I didn't like his name. I thought he was like taking off Alvin Stardust, and I thought he was an Indian version of I thought it was all very cheapskate. So I kind of cheated myself out of listening to some of the best music for 3 years, you know, really shoot myself in the head.
Sibylla, would you mind raising your hand, and Miguel also your digital hand? There we go. Now settings.
Do I need to raise a hand as well, or not?
Yeah, but I realize it's set on automatically dropping the hand when a person speaks, and so I have to find the control to allow the hand to stay up. And I haven't found that. General.
It looks like a bunch of mugshots, like police mugshots, doesn't it, really?
Well, we are all pirates, so
This is true.
it makes sense.
I can't find it.
That is real English humor.
It looks like that to me.
That's good. That's good.
So I need some technical help here. They're telling me that I have to choose another video camera in my settings for some reason.
I
The
had
one
that earlier. It was the right.
So
I
what
had
you
that
can do
problem
is
myself. Yeah.
what you can do is restart your computer. What's happened is that some other app like Skype or something has grabbed your camera and won't let it go.
okay.
And so if you restart your computer.
Okay, wait a second. Let's see.
Let me talk to Gary.
Oh yeah. You doing that thing, aren't you? That...
Yeah.
Now I've got it.
Hey, there she is.
Woo!
By the way, if
Just a
anyone
second, I'll
thinks
talk
I'm
to
out of
Gary.
focus, that is how life is here. I'm just out of focus.
Yeah, yeah. That's life in Cornwall.
Yep. It's a bit misty.
That's right.
Did you get the winds?
We got the winds last night, yeah, but because I'm cheapskate, I haven't really been out to have a look yet. You know,
Mm.
it's bad. I should be able to give you a complete report, but I haven't been out there. Kind of like,
Wise choice.
yeah, rather taken up with this idea of joining you guys as well. Mm.
Judith, I think you could probably raise your digital hand so
yes,
that you're
yes.
up there.
Yes, yes, yes. There we, no, that's the wrong hand.
That's a thumb.
Not the thumb, the hand.
That's
Okay.
no, that's the clapping.
No, wrong. Come on, get the right hands.
Where, I can't find the,
It's
there it-
been-
I got it.
All right, there you go. There you go. High five. Okay. Now we lost you, Sibyl. Okay, there you are. All right.
I just wanted to be in the right sequence here. Where's Judith? Oh, Judith has lowered her hand again.
I did?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Having a little problem with the hands today.
Yeah, I'm having a problem with
Talk to the hand.
technique today. All right, there it is.
There we are.
Okay.
And there I am again. And Paul could, if he wanted to, raise his digital hand as well.
I don't know where my digital hand is.
It's under reactions. Unfortunately, there's a setting somewhere that once you, after you raise your hand, next time you speak, your hand comes down automatically. And I want to change it back to the way it was, which is your hand stays up, but I can't find that setting. And so unfortunately, we will just have to do without it. And you can raise your hand, but as soon as you speak, then it comes down. And I was hoping we could designate the panel as you know, the people with their hands up. But
so when I'm speaking, the hand doesn't come down. But when Judith speaks, her hand does come up, down. I mean.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
This is something we have to find out about Zoom. But I cannot find the setting for that.
Yeah.
You know, I've been looking everywhere.
Well, Paul, you have to raise down your hand, please.
Raise down my hand.
Raise
no,
down.
not Paul Mason. Paul Moeller, sorry.
Okay.
Our friend Paul Moeller, let me. Yes. Take it down, please.
The Mr. Mueller.
There you go.
Yeah, that's great.
Delina, do you want to join our panel? You're the right person.
Delina she's on. I think Delina was going to join us. I mean, she was going to be on mute for a while because there's somebody sleeping in her household. Is that right, Delina? Okay, great. Well, I've had internet problems this morning, and which means that I didn't get a chance to bone up on Paul Mason's many great accomplishments. And we know that he's been running this wonderful Facebook page, Roots of TM. And we know that he is a collector and historian. One of the things that he has is a huge collection of comic books, which I think is wonderful. So I'm sorry, I'm at a loss. So
can I correct you there? I have a collection of original comic artwork.
Ah,
I don't have that many comic books, because Americans, when they refer to comic books, it's like a different thing. It's superheroes and all that. In Britain, comics are like funnies, you know, and I collect funnies and I collect the artwork. And this has got nothing to do with TM, so let's talk about it. Artworks back in the day, they were drawn 4 times as big as the comic. So I collect the artwork because they're absolutely magnificent. They're 4 times what the comic is. So you see it 4 times as big, and you can see all the detail of the artist, you know? So it's, okay, it's a madness. What's your madness?
Do you have the comics about the Indian Puranas, Paul?
I've got some of those.
I like those.
The Amachitra Karta, is that what they're called?
I don't know. I talk a lot about the Puranas because the Maharshi gave some hints to that. And the Puranas are all some hero stories. And the most amazing thing is, you know, 2 gods, man and woman, come home and there's a parcel delivered at their door, and it's a baby inside. So that's the main point in all these comics, that baby is delivered by a parcel. So a whole story of how babies are produced is completely mystery in these Purana cartoons.
Who is actually speaking right now? I can't see you.
He's
I think it's maybe Joe Diop.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this New Beginnings Forum. And it's really a great pleasure to introduce our honored and beloved guest, Paul Mason, who, as I say, I cannot introduce properly. We only know him from his great work in collating historical material about Gurudev and his great Facebook page, which he's been moderating with such care for so many years. And the format for today's meeting is that we're going to have a panel who will chat with Paul Mason. And that panel consists of Delana Thomas from Honolulu. Could we ask everybody to mute their microphones unless they're on the panel or called on to speak? Miguel Cebola from Portugal and Canada. Rick Archer, if he's here. Gary Benner when he joins us. Sibylla Rovier from Germany, and Judith Borg from Sweden by way of USA. So that's our panel, who'll be, and Professor Rob Gordon from Palm Springs, another very honored guest. So if everybody else could mute their microphones in the meantime, they'll be much appreciated. And I will kick the ball off by asking Paul to tell us 1 or 2 stories, these great stories, and I think they're very relevant, about Gurudev's life in the jungle, which is really quite astonishing. So I don't know, maybe you could start by telling us about the tiger with the sore paw, Paul, and the circumstances around that.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's great to actually hear your voices and see you, not in 3D, but at least, you know, like active. It's really nice. And I ought to introduce myself a little because it's fun. I'm not really an author. okay, that part of it is a fake. I've become an author, and I only really accepted that about 2 weeks ago, because I realized that quite a few books have come out in my name. But I never set out to be an author. And in fact, I've been everything else but. I've worked as a printer, I've worked as a high vacuum technician, I've worked as a patisserie chef. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of jobs that I've done. Well, you would, because you've got to believe it. But there's a staggering list. And it's great because I've actually lived a life, and I've worked with a lot of people. I've done a lot of technical jobs. I've done a lot of thinking jobs, and I haven't got paid very much. But it's all okay, because I'd visited India. I'd hitchhiked to India at 18, and I'd had a kind of revelation. I basically dropped out, and I went beyond dropping out. I was actually, to all intents and purposes, going to be a sadhu. I was dropping out of being a Westerner. I'd had a really good time in the 60s. I turned on, I tuned in, and I dropped out. But I got sick of that because I wanted something special. I think those of us who did quite a lot of stuff back in the 60s ended up wanting something a little bit more special. And I actually stopped taking drugs because I thought I didn't need them. It was a kind of like pretty stupid decision, but that's what got me to hitchhike to India, because I really got sick of the consumer westernized mentality. I wanted something more substantial, something that actually made me satisfied as a human being, right down to the core, without putting anything on, without trends and cults and phases and things. And I hitchhiked to India with no particular agenda other than to get away from it all and find out if anybody else had got any answers. And I just happened to go to Rishikesh. I didn't go there because I knew anything about Hinduism. I went to Rishikesh because Maharishi lived there, and I had this vague notion that I might get a chance to chat with him about philosophy. Do you know what? I didn't even know that he taught meditation. I was that ignorant, and I didn't care. I was just on a roll. I was going to the Himalayas. I mean, why did I need to know anything about Maharishi? And he wasn't in, so I felt that was a big letdown. He let me down. I'd gone all this way. No, it wasn't like that, because I didn't even know I was going to go and see him. And living there, as some of you guys have been to Rishikesh, some of you have been to Swagashram, some of you have stayed, whether it's with Maharishi or down in the village. I loved it there. And from day one, I knew I had to stay in this environment. I had to be there. After hitchhiking right across the world, I knew I needed a break. And that break was to be in Rishikesh and to soak it up. And I gave myself a month to stay there. That's precisely what I stayed, a month. And in that time, I met loads of sadhus, yogis, and so forth. And in that time, I got initiated. Well, I wasn't really very interested in getting initiated. I already felt that I sort of understood meditation. I tried it one night, and I did it a few times at home after work. I used to sit there and just like relax, and I meditated, and I didn't kind of think it was a biggie. I thought everybody kind of would do something like that. But this was more formal, and I was taught meditation, and I was really frustrated because what happened to me in my meditation was that instead of getting to this like quiet center where God was supposed to reside, I had a very comic strip picture of what I was about to experience. I was about to get God. Okay, that's pretty simple. It's like I hadn't paid for it. I was told how to do it, and I was going to get God like there and then, 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. And it didn't happen. And I thought, well, what's going on here? What's this sort of meditation if it doesn't take you straight to that point, like what you said, you know? And then something quite strange happened. A vortex of light lit up within me, and I saw all these figures within the vortex, and they kind of got saris on, and they're floating. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a bit far out. Sorry, I've got to use the language of the day. It was a bit far out. I'm thinking, what am I actually seeing within myself? All these beautiful women, but not, they can't be women because they're within me. And they're kind of coming in like a spiral. And I'm trying to, it's like you'd think hallucination, but I'm trying to catch their eyes. I'm trying to see any of them in the eye. And they're all avoiding looking at me. They appear to be like looking around and being really nosy. If you can imagine having like a few dozen Indian women in your house, they'd be nosing everywhere, opening the drawers, opening the cupboards. And it felt like that. It felt like I was really being checked out. And I'm not saying I was annoyed about it, but I was very, very curious, like what is going on? Then I suddenly remembered, I was taught like in this meditation process, if you're having thoughts, then you should return to the mantra. So I returned to the mantra. And all this beautiful vision just went just like that. Oh, and shortly afterwards, maybe another 10 minutes, I actually had that experience that they've been rolling out of going beyond thought, going beyond sound, and actually like going beyond it. And I was like so astonished. I mean, it had nothing to do with beautiful women going down a spiral. It was just what I really needed after taking that much acid back in the day and having so much crazy experiences. That's just what I needed. Drop, pinned silence, totally nothing happening. It was so beautiful and it lasted a long time. And as I came out of it, I felt totally reinvigorated. I felt like a new person. So there you have it, a testimony. I was born again. And since then, I've kind of like just been busking along and trying to make sense of it. That's why I talked about my working life. I came back to Britain and I didn't care what I did because basically something had happened to me that I wanted to verify, if you want. I wanted to verify, was Maharishi making up what he was telling these teachers or what? I'd had that experience, but could you give it to other people? So gradually, over a period of time, I started to research him, find out like where was he born, what's he got to say about this, what's he going to say about that. Hey, and what's that guy with the kind of like serious expression in that painting? What was he all about? Now, I was introduced, just now about talking about Gurudev, but at that point, I knew zero. Just like all of us, we were given really zero information about Gurudev's teaching and very little in the way of historical profile. We were told that he was a boy when he left home, that he met this fabulous guru, but we didn't get much of an idea what the guy was about. I was frustrated. Okay, I told you the good side, that I had this like revelatory experience or whatever, but I was frustrated that intellectually I couldn't get a handle on Maharishi and I couldn't get a handle on Gurudev. So I went back to India and I got these books on Gurudev in Hindi, and I thought to myself, I'm going to translate these. I'm not a scholar. My grandfather was a scholar, but I was not a scholar at all. I was an old hippie. I was a young hippie. Sorry, I correct myself. I was a young hippie and I didn't care about scholarship and I didn't care about squid. Okay. So I set myself to learn enough Hindi to share the stories of Gurudev, basically, which is what I did. You know that. And I published them. But I kind of gave up because I found a fourth book. As you probably know, I translated 3 books. And this guy in India, the son of one of Gurudev's security detail, he sent me a missing book. He sent me book number 4, which I've been looking for ages. I didn't even know existed. It just had the title. And he sent it to me, gratis, free, for nothing. I only know of like 3 copies of the book on the planet, and he sent me one of those. And immediately I scanned it and I uploaded it to the net so anybody can look at it, okay? Because that's what I am. I'm left leaning, share everything kind of mentality. Well, why didn't I do book number 4? I got through it and I thought, no, his ideas are just too weird. I cannot, with a clear conscience, translate this book and put it out so that you guys and anybody else gets a new book on Gurudev, because it's just too weird. I'd also started the Gurudev Legacy Trust, which is an attempt to form an archive of Gurudev materials, and the German guy and a couple of Americans assisted me in doing that. And then I went and left, because that's the sort of person I am. You know, you set something up, then you leave it. What's that expression they say in the States? I wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me, isn't it? Yeah. Didn't somebody say that? Some famous person. And I felt like that, and I left the Gurudev Legacy Trust, cover me. And where was I? Yeah, this 4th book, there were bits about the book that disturbed me, right? So I didn't finish the project, and I abandoned the project, and I didn't tell anybody why, except for Lothar, one of the guys on Gurudev Legacy. I indicated to him, I said, I don't think we ought to try and explain anything that we translate, you know, because it's just too far out, he was saying. And I'm going to have a breather. And then recently, I was going to completely start working on any books, any translation, any publication, and go back to playing music and messing about with music. And then something pulled me back, and it says, you know, you never did finish that Gurudev book. And I kind of forgot how much it had weirded me out, you know. And I went back to it and I started translating it. And then gradually I thought, no, I've got another book to write here. And as you know, if you follow what I've been saying on Roots of TM, I've actually started another book, put that on pause, done another book, and I really like going for it. I'm really excited for doing it, until like 2 days ago. And I'm thinking, Brian just said, can you tell us about the tiger? I haven't forgotten. It's like I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, this guy was absolutely gobsmacking, astonishing person. We're not just talking about some old guy in a photograph or in a portrait. You're talking about somebody who not only left home at 9 years to find God, but actually endured, like living in the wilderness, in the jungle and that, for the larger part of his life. I mean, he set up an ashram when he was what, in his 70s. I don't have details, but he set up an ashram in the name of his teacher in 1936, but he was born in 68. Do your maths on that. He was an old man before he set up that ashram. The rest of his life he lived out in the jungle. I could not spend one night in the jungle. I love jungles. I've spent a lot of time lurking about jungles. I go for nice long walks, and maybe an hour walk, 2 hours, 3 hours. I look for elephant dung. I look for signs of tigers. I'm really like excited by that. I've spent time with like Hanuman monkeys. It excites me beyond reason being in the jungle. But I couldn't spend a night there. Just do my head up. And there's a guy who spent consistently, not only days, but weeks, but months, but years. Who was looking after him? Who was bringing him his sandwiches? Who was cooking for him? He didn't use fire. He didn't beg. He made a pact with his mother that he would never beg. Okay. Like, this is very awkward. But when I started to find out that he was also like on very good terms with tigers, as Brian's telling about, there was this situation whereby there was a hunting squad came to India from Nepal to track down a man-eating tiger. The man-eating tiger had killed like about 100 people. So there was a justification in many people's eyes to get rid of it. And the king, the Maharaja of Nepal, came down with his flunkies to take that tiger out. And they all but did that. They shot the tiger, multiple shots, but the tiger escaped. So they tracked the tiger, as you would, thinking that they'd find a carcass or whatever. They didn't find the carcass. What they found was the tiger was still alive, but there was this guy with him, and he was lying at the feet of Gurudev, and Gurudev was tipping up his special pot of water and washing his wounds and speaking to him gently, reassuring him and trying to discourage him from his violence. And he kept repeating a phrase in Hindi, which is like, tone down, cool it, like cut out the violence and you'll be all right. You'll enjoy life. It's like, I don't know how you get on with tigers. My own family are very worried about me. I was left on my own in a zoo once, and my son came back and he said, I got this bad feeling you might you might actually scale the fence, because I was watching tigers, and it's like I wouldn't have done, because he'd been with me in a park, where and he knew that I was a bit mad when it came to trusting nature, but I didn't climb over the tigers. But Gurudev did. Gurudev hung out with them. There's multiple stories of him hanging out with carnivorous animals in the jungle. And it was on account of that particular encounter, the one with the bloody paw and that the Maharaja of Nepal went back to Nepal. They couldn't get a word out of Gurudev. He wouldn't speak to them. Okay, don't know why. He got a huff with them. I guess it's because they were shooting the tiger. That would be my guess. Anyway, he went back to Nepal, and he brought back with him his sort of wise man to come and speak with Gurudev. And this wise man had all these questions, all these unanswered riddles. And just by being with Gurudev, he figured them all out. So he was a bit magicked. He was kind of thinking that here was somebody of some unusual worth. Bear in mind, he wasn't famous at this time. He was a recluse. He was living in the jungle. People didn't know of him. And this guy went back to Nepal, and there was a big article apparently in the paper about Gurudev, because they wanted to talk. I don't know, because of the hunt and finding this hermit with the man-eating tiger. And it was that particular wise guy who wrote to Varanasi saying, if you need a Shankaracharya, there's your man. And that was in 1908, I think, 1906 or 1908. As I say, I don't have my notes with me. And it was in 1941 that he took the post. So I reckon that's about 33 years that he didn't become the Shankaracharya. So for all those people that think, oh yeah, he would really want that job, like everybody else seems to want it in India. They're clamoring to be a Shankaracharya. They're going to court to argue that it's their right to be one. Here's a guy who wouldn't be persuaded in 33 years. So I think you're getting the measure of it. I've become very intrigued with this guy. Not passionately, my passions tend to go for musicians like Jeff Beck or Jimi Hendrix. Or that. I mean, I can relate to them much better. But this guy, he's an Indian and he's a guru, and he was clearly the real deal. And he kind of intrigues me, as I said. I'm repeating myself. But to bring you up to date, 2 or 3 days ago, I put out a note on Roots of TM. What did people think that Gurudev was referring to when he said a threefold path of progress? And there's about 4, 5, maybe 4 main threefold paths that you can pick out intellectually. You can say da 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 or da 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 or da 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 da. And it's like foreseeable, it's formulaic. You can get a book on Hinduism and you'll find 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's like, take your choice. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I don't think he is. I think he's already said what he means. And if that was the case, he's already said it in the sentence that he's already used. And I analysed that. I analysed the Sanskritic wording. I realised that he'd started each of 3 words with adi. And he was saying, like, material, supernatural, and spiritual. I looked it up. Nobody else is saying that that's a threefold path. And I was a bit mystified because I had to finish that page of my book. I had to write, the threefold path is this. I couldn't do it. So I thought, well, I'll cop out and I'll leave it to the reader. I'll say there are many threefold paths in Hinduism. Oh, that will do. And I'm thinking, no, I need to know exactly what he was saying. And I kept studying everything that he's supposed to have said in that period. And it's monomaniacal. It's got nothing to do with threefold paths like you've got in your primer, your Hindu primer, you know. It's got nothing to do with it. The guy was actually telling you that the way to progress is by contacting the Devata, or Devata, I don't know how you pronounce it. Huh? And it's like, you cannot be serious, man. You know, what about ethics? What about morals? Yeah, he big on morals, big on ethics, but that's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying that. The threefold path, he wasn't saying that. He was saying there's the material, there's the supernatural, and there's the spiritual. I'm thinking, no, that doesn't add up at all. And I'm reading more and more what he had to say during that period, and it comes up again and again, the Devata. It's like, you've got to kind of like worship these beings. And I'm saying, he cannot be for real. And there's so many stories of miracle workings about him in the jungle, like that food would turn up, a big kind of can of cream. And people around him would kind of say, where did that come from? And he'd say, oh, get that man's name, or something like that. And basically, I'm thinking, I do not know whether I can cope with the connotation, because I'm really, my father was a physicist, a scientist. I didn't really get involved with weird stuff. I didn't go to seances. I didn't have a Ouija board. I didn't do anything to do with any spiritualism or any otherism like that. It was like hard-nosed, you know, like knock, knock, who's there? You know, it wasn't things that go bump in the night. I'm not having a laugh at people who believe in those things. It just didn't enter my world. It wasn't a part of my childhood. It wasn't a part of my upbringing. So I was gobsmacked 2 days ago when I come to the realization that this man was behind Maharishi, you know, that big picture. That's basically his message. Contact these invisible, subtle energies and get their support for you. Oh yeah, be ethical, be moral, follow a good. And I'm still in shock. Probably a lot of you people are already invested in something. Like I hear people do yagyas, they believe in Jyotish and that. I don't do yagyas. I don't do Jyotish. I'm really a very ordinary person. Ordinary meaning I don't do that stuff. I mean, I'm not ordinary in other ways, I guess. But what I'm trying to say is that for me, it's been a revelation. And if it was anybody else than Gurudev, I would stop this and go, well, they're a nutter. You can't just expect disembodied spirits to help you. You know, you can't, that's ridiculous. You might get a helping hand. Oh, if you're really, really lucky, when you're I mean, my wife was seriously ill in India, and the day before she was seriously ill, somebody pressed me into having a puja. I don't have pujas. I think we've established that. I'm really ordinary, but I don't even go and have pujas. And he'd asked us to go for a puja, and I thought, okay, I want to go and have a cup of tea now. And just as I was going off for a cup of tea, this Indian guy came along and said, you come for, you know, we do another puja. And I said, oh, really? I really wanted my cup of tea. And he said, no, you come, you do this special puja. And I said, oh, for heaven's sake. But it was a beautiful temple. It was a complex of temples where we were. And it was beautiful. And they were asking things like, what's your mother's name? And so forth and so forth. It was getting a bit serious. It wasn't just chanting. It was personal. And then I had my cup of tea. So good ending to the story. But the following day, to all intents and purposes, my wife died. Okay. You like that story? Well, she died for about half an hour. And I got her propped up in the back of an Indian taxi because the taxi driver wanted to lay her out in the back and have me sitting in front. And I said, no, I'll sit her up. And she came back to life. And she looked like Kali. Her eyes were shooting all over the place. Freaked me out, something rotten. But at least she was breathing and she was making funny sounds. And she was seriously ill. She'd had a brain hemorrhage. And do you know, when I actually took stock after she'd had work on her, we landed in a good hospital and they fixed her up. She had a neurosurgeon from a guy who trained in Zurich fixing her up. But I couldn't help but think that us having had that puja had effect, because when I'd asked the guy, why are you doing this puja? He explained to me, he said, for long life. I've never had a puja since. You know, from like an outside agency. I mean, TM puja maybe. I had one the other day, online one. But this was different, and it was very specific. And we were bullied into having it. And it's like you can't help but think afterwards, what was that about? Having a puja for long life just before she's about to die. That's my testimony. Anybody got any questions?
Paul, what does Gurudev mean by contacting devatas? What's the technique that he talks about? Is it puja, as you know, yagyas, as you were just saying, or how does he describe it?
Well, I mean, for those people who are already familiar with my translations of his books, he's always recommending for one to meditate with our Ishtadeva mantra. And for those people who haven't seen it, I circulated a description of somebody's personal initiation recently, where it showed that he part of the meditation process that he was teaching a lot of people was on a deity and how to use that. Yeah, I think he was. I think he was teaching everybody that he taught, seemingly, to get in contact with some devata. But he was also obviously encouraging people to do yagyas. He was really, really into yagyas. And for anybody here who's interested in Jyotish, he was tremendously interested in Jyotish as well. He would consult a sort of, there's a special name for it, is it puncturing or something, to find out where the planets were or whatever before making an important decision. Again, that completely gobsmacked me. I'm thinking, look, man, he spent all that time out in the jungle. He wouldn't need to be caught up with astrology. More into astrology than any of us. Totally. He would delay somebody's initiation until the right conjunction of things. He's a very mystery man, this Gurudev. I feel very privileged to be studying him. But I'm none the wiser over what you know about him, really. I mean, yeah, bits and bobs, but basically you might have a better overall picture than I do. I'm quite open to that.
Well, if any of the rest of the panel want to come in with questions, here's Delana.
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
A few questions. when is that fourth book coming out? And and also, what turned you off about it initially? Of course, it was
good question.
It was years ago. And also, material, supernatural, spiritual, threefold path. You didn't. I'm wondering, do you choose one, or did he recommend the Devata, the Yagya, Jyotish route? And are you aware of how the TM meditation? Did you ever hear anything that would tell us something about how our Bija Mantra TM meditation compares to his Ishtadevata mantra meditation that it looks like he relied on for Jyotish to determine for people? So sorry, that's a few questions, and I can go over them again if you forget them. But first of all, when your book is coming out?
Where have you gone, Paul? Has he disappeared?
I think so.
He must have knocked his power supply or something. He'll come back in a minute. I'll call him on the phone. Yeah, you can just reconnect by pressing the same link, the same internet link, and you'll come right back. Okay. Joining meeting. Okay, so you'll be right back. No, not yet. I don't see you. But there is, but you shouldn't need it. What I would do is just close your browser and start again, and close Zoom and your browser, and then just press the button on Messenger. Press the URL on Messenger as before. Okay. All right. Right. Okay. No, fabulous. It was really great, fascinating. I'm sure yeah, no, it was great. Really, really great. Yeah. No, it'll just make great video. Everybody's just sitting quietly. They're a very good class. Yeah, room 17. They're a very good class. Right. Right. Good. No. Yeah. Does it say? Launch meeting, that's it. Right. There you go. Now we see you coming up. Right. Here we go. You were just waiting for your audio to come up.
Participant enable translation. Hey, yay, yay.
There you are. Now if you can raise your hand, it'll be. Oh, there you are. Yep. Great.
Do you want me to use the yellow hand again?
Yeah, that's good. That should locate you in the top left corner.
Cool.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, should I get off the phone?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. It's the support of nature. Sorry, we laugh at these things. So yeah, the question is a really right and proper question. If I can take them in slightly different order. The reason that I stopped with that book was where Gurudev was basically saying that temples that weren't being administered properly by the proper pujari, or were being visited by the wrong sort of person, or that the statues, the what you call them, the images of the gods, if they were being touched by the wrong people, that they would get inhabited by ghosts. Now, to me, I can't read that and then go, oh yeah, right, inhabited by ghosts and and I'll put that in. And what's for tea? Do you know, it's like, excuse me, the idea of a statue being inhabited by a ghost was not resonant with the way that I was brought up. And that and other stuff that pertaining to invisible entities, I don't say that it disturbed me. It just didn't jive. You know, it was like, well, whatever. I think I've got other things to do with my time than to translate things that I can't relate to in any way. You know, a lot of people are into ghosts. I mean, we have a castle down here, and people will talk about, oh yeah, there was a bump and so and so saw a ghost, and we're going to set up cameras. I mean, it doesn't interest me. What interests me about that castle is that a guy lived there who had lots of amazing talent, and he had an Indian wife and stuff like that. You know, human stuff. I'm hearing some funny noises.
Yeah, we're just muting people as they come on. Sorry about that.
So I mean, again, I'm shooting myself in the foot, because probably a lot of you, you know, you don't feel the same about ghosts and about entities than I do. And I'm not judging them in any way. I'm just talking about my own narrow-mindedness. Okay. And therefore, it was too much of a challenge for me to continue translating this sort of material when I couldn't get behind it, because I got behind meditation because it is a happy thing. It was better than turning on with hash or something. It was something that is a clean high, you know, but having to kind of involve celestial entities was a step that I wasn't going to take. And that was specifically because of the Hare Krishna organization continually releasing books with pretty images. It just looked like a commercial stunt to try and get people in with all these pretty pictures. But I'm afraid I'm not much closer now. And I think we're talking about Gurudev here, and I think it might be true. I think a lot of people have already made up their minds it is true, but until a couple of days ago, I haven't really got to that point. And that must make me look rather out of the mix. But there you go. I've got other qualities. When's the book going to come out? Well, at the moment, I'm just lingering in 1944, which was the year that he came out with these remarks. And I'm trying to decode them. Something I didn't say when I was talking about having stayed in Rishikesh, one thing that I actually slightly quirky about the way that I look at things was that when I was taught meditation, I didn't expect it to be in plain language. I expected to be, there's some riddle that I had to tease open and unlock. I mean, if you look at Tolkien or you look at any like adventure story, it's always on you to unlock it. It's for you to figure it out. It's for you to solve something. And I didn't think anybody was going to tell me something about my inner spirit, about God, without having to make an interpretation, without having to kind of decode it. And that's what I've come to the conclusion with Gurudev, is that it's all there and I've just got to give it a bit more time. So in order to answer your question, Delena, is that I feel that I'm going to continue translating and writing this book because I'm loving it. But I don't know, I feel an obligation to try and crack the code, you know. I come from a nation of code crackers. You know, we in the last World War, they were there. Bexley or whatever it was, you know, trying to figure out the code. And my father was one of the first people to do with computers. And it's like he worked there and in some other place, I think he worked there, but he worked at a similar establishment. And I'm hardwired to decode. You know, when I was a kid, I was into coding, you know, into invisible ink and all that, as probably lots of you were. But I'm quite passionate about trying to decode Gurudev, because I don't think it's enough just to translate him and then share it and say, oh yeah, there was this wise man who existed before Maharishi was around, and then Maharishi joined up with him. I mean, that's a whole story in itself as to what Maharishi did and the validity of meditation. And there are different topics, and I don't want to confuse them, but whilst I'm working on Gurudev, I do feel that I'm trying to decode a very singular man. I've got a feeling that he was way far higher than like Einstein or any of the people that we revere as clear thinkers. I think he was onto stuff that we just have got no idea. And I think, well, that, you know, I'm not as young as I was, and it certainly makes me feel younger with a challenge like this. I love challenges. I love decoding. What better way to spend my time than to try and figure out the meaning of life through Gurudev? I mean, it's like, it's pretty good. I'd like help with it. You know, I feel very alone when I'm working on these projects, apart from the fact that he keeps handing me stuff and intimating things through the ethers, and I've never had that experience before. I only had it once before, and that was when I was doing the Maharishi biography, and I sensed that Gurudev might be around, and I felt very much his approval at what I was doing. I felt that it was actually being instigated by him, and I couldn't figure out that at all. But a lot of the information about Gurudev, the Maharishi biography, came to me very easily. And I was astonished because I'm not a writer. I think I've explained that to you. I thought I was typing a load of nonsense. I was, you know, and I thought, well, most of that's nonsense. And I read it back afterwards, and it wasn't. I thought, well, what did I just do then? And who's the doer? You know, and I'm not a mystic. I think we covered that. And it's like, I do feel that the guy helped me, and I feel that he's jostled back into my life and trying to get me to do this job. And I would like help. I really would. And that's why I go on Roots of TM and I say, look, I've just read this. What's it mean? And largely people don't answer me, which is a real shame, because I actually mean, can somebody help me? You know, I don't mind doing all the donkey work with all the.
But Paul, I have a question. Paul, I have a question.
Who's asking me?
It's
Who? Hello?
Yeah, the question is.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, so what was his name?
I didn't hear anything just then. Can you repeat yourself?
Yeah, what was his name before?
It's gone quiet again. I hear nothing. I hear nothing.
Maybe he can write his question in the chat.
No, I can hear you now. Somebody just said you can write his question in the chat. Came through good. So what was the question?
I think that was Joe, and I think he's gone. I can't see him anymore.
What was the question?
I don't know.
He's gone now. Delana hadn't finished answering her questions, asking her questions.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Now I have other questions, and I'm going to ask them real quick, if that helps. Did he ever say how he got his teachings? He's in the jungle for decades. How did he learn about all these things with
I think from his guru, Swami Krishnand. Yeah. He seems to have been another very mysterious person. The first thing that Guru Dev, Swami Brahmananda, said to his guru was, I need you to show me how to never stretch my hand, I'm paraphrasing, in front of a stranger. Because his mother had asked him that. You can imagine being in a situation where your mum has said, don't become a begging sadhu. It kind of like sears into your brain. That was virtually the last thing that she'd said to him. And it was on his mind never to do that, which he didn't do. You know, to the best of our knowledge, he would prefer to go hungry than to put out his hand. And that was what he asked of his teacher. Now, it seems to me that he learned he learned everything from his guru, other than those things that he already found out before he met his guru. Yeah.
So when you talk about the threefold path, material, supernatural, and spiritual, are those three legitimate paths to enlightenment, or what was he actually saying there? Was he saying those are three things you can do, but they're not all the ideal you should do?
He was saying you need to read the Puranas. He was saying that it's all revealed in the Puranas, and that you need to look at the Dharma Shastras as to how to affect that contact with the Devata. I'll dig out the three words. I haven't decoded it. It's like I know that what he's saying in those three words, the rough translation is the super material, the supernatural, and the super spiritual. But I don't have it to hand because we're on this Skype call or whatever it is, Zoom call. I don't have those words to hand, and I can conjure them up elsewise. But I don't think they're significant. His threefold path that he was talking about was not the threefold path you would expect. And the equals enlightenment or the equals moksha isn't either. I don't think he was a conventional teacher at all. That's what I'm trying to say, that the expectations of what he was trying to say, I think he was falling outside of those expectations. And when I looked through, and I was trying to explain to Sybil earlier, that when I looked through, I have all his teachings that came out within his ashram and books on one single file in Hindi, which I can speed search, I can rattle through it. And I looked for the threefold path. And I also looked in component parts, knowing what the threefold paths were. I looked at them individually, looked for Artha and Dharma and so forth. And I found he wasn't teaching those threefold paths in any of the books that I was knocked out. I just assumed it. You know, it's like, well, you would do, wouldn't you? Because we were all familiar with that. We've all read Hindu primers, you know. and he wasn't teaching that. He was teaching something else, and that's, you're asking me what, and that's a really great question, and that's what I'm asking myself. It seems it was something much more immediate. It wasn't so much about, you know, like 20 years to enlightenment or something. It was a ready connection. It was getting there quick. And that reminds me of when I learned to, sorry, I'm feeling my camera. I want to be doing that. Yeah, when I learned meditation, I had no idea that you're supposed to do it every day. I mean, like the idea wouldn't have been attractive to me. I just thought I was just doing it the once, you know, with this guy, he's going to show me the meditation, and I was just going to do it the once. And that's why I wanted to get it all done and dusted. I wanted, you know, instant realization. I didn't want to kind of like get into a process, come back every week or anything like that. And when he actually indicated to me that I'd be coming back the next day, I was shocked. And when he said, oh, and this is how we meditate, and we do this morning and evening, and I'm sort of thinking, you are kidding me. You know, like I've got a life to live. You're not telling me what time I'm doing what. You know, I mean, I'll do what I want this afternoon. I don't have to go and meditate. You know what? I was not in any way prepared for it. And I already had what I wanted. I'd already contacted exactly what I wanted. I had the experience. I had the experience of the Devata, or so I now believe. I'm not 100% sure that's what was going on. But I also had this incredibly chilled out experience of transcending, of going beyond the gunas, of being beyond my body. It took me quite a while to get used to having a body again. And it was very exciting to realize that I got one, that I got legs. You know, it's like, wow, this is stupendous, you know. And I think that that's what Gurudev was pushing people towards. I don't think he was trying to get them enlightened in one lifetime. I think he wanted them to get it right on, you know, instantaneous. I might be wrong. I've got no evidence for saying that, but I think that's probably what it was about. I don't really understand why anybody would say, well, you need to do this for 30 years. It's like, you know, we come from the instant coffee generation, don't we? You know, it's like 30 years is a long time, man. You know, I don't know if I'll survive that long. When I was a kid, I didn't even look forward to the idea of surviving that long. I mean, you got the hope I die before I get old. I mean, like, what sort of a message is it that you'll evolve in about 20, 30, 40 years? And then nowadays, people who didn't get, or think they didn't get evolved, are kind of talking about how many lifetimes and joking about it. It's like, I think a lot of people are more evolved than they think they are. It's just they've been told that they need to take a long time to get there. That's my own personal offering. And I don't think I've improved one jot since the time when I did my first meditation. They're just top-ups. They're kind of incremental, kind of like reaffirmations that, you know, like yesterday, I didn't expect to have any sort of meditation. Then I suddenly realized I had, and it was like, whoa, that was nice. Do you know, and I'll be honest, I'm in company with you. I guess you'll edit this bit out, but it's like being stoned. I mean, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that was nice. That was cool. I don't have a moral problem about relating it to being stoned, because I used to really, I spent years stoned. I mean, I don't think I ever straightened out in all that time. Might have not taken anything, but I think it was residual, you know, and I have no regret about it. It was great. And it's nice nowadays to feel like that as a norm meditationally, because I don't have the impact of kind of like getting strung out or wondering, you know, like, is that a knocking at the window or whatever? Do you know, I don't have the problem of happiness versus sort of chemical stuff. But coming back to Gurudev, I think he's long past trying to teach anybody like that. I'm not sure he wanted to teach anybody. I think it was his teacher wanted him to. His guru wanted him to come out of the jungle and for him to share his presence with people. And that's why he did it. And he came out and he formed his ashram 5 years before he became Shankaracharya. So he was readying himself to, as it were, be helpful. I don't think he was strictly trying to, I mean, look, he didn't have that many devotees. I think there was said to be 44 close devotees of his. And that's not an awful lot, really. I mean, perhaps it is, perhaps it's a huge amount, but it doesn't sound like it to me. And I don't think that's what he was trying to do. He would send everybody off to other people. Yeah, if they wanted to know about anything, he'd say, oh, go and see so-and-so, or go and see your own guru. He wasn't trying to set up an organization. And people ask me, they say, oh, what did Gurudev call his meditation? Was it Dhyan Bhavatit or whatever? I think he called it meditation, Dhyan and Japa. I don't think he needed a brand name because he thought everybody was doing it. I mean, you guys probably know, but if you become a sadhu, you have to have a guru. Yeah, I mean, it's the way it works in India. Is you can't call yourself a sadhu without finding a teacher, and the teacher gives you a name, and they give you, guess what, a guru mantra. And that is the sound that you use in order to purify yourself. And it's a normal thing. It wasn't something that Gurudev was doing and that everybody needed to go to Gurudev to do it. You might want to go to him because you might think that he was like the real deal, but he was advocating that you go to any guru, but he was. So Paul, go.
So Paul, what you're saying is that in the last few days, the kind of revelation that you've had from this book is that what Gurudev was recommending to everybody was yagyas, basically, Devata worship or Devata experience in some way.
I think the word worship is very Western, and
yeah,
one could have. One of the problem with translating is that we use a word and then people go, I know what that's about. And I'm a culprit of that as well, because I say something and then somebody tries to correct me. It's a problem area because we have all the association. So we call it worship. Would he have called it worship? I call it worship. Yeah, fine. But there might be other shades of meaning. And let's face it, I don't know how many Indians we've got on the board here, but Indians don't have a problem, culturally speaking, about worship. They don't they're not self-conscious about it. They don't say, oh, like don't judge me for worshiping. It's a much more Western idea of
so is this the code that you're trying to decode, is what he means by Devata experience, or his
part of it?
Yeah,
I feel that even in Transcendental meditation, there's a bit of code breaking necessary. Well, this is a confession. When I first learned to meditate, I thought that there was a bit of information that I hadn't been given. And I decided to do that for myself because they said, right, well, once you get beyond thought, you get into this area of the transcendental, the source of creative intelligence. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, so all you've got to do is to be beyond the field of thought. And I knew that before I came to Rishikesh. For some reason, I already knew it, whether I'd heard it out of a newspaper or whether I knew it innately. But I knew that you had to go beyond thought. And that's what I did. After I'd been meditating for a while, I thought I'll just drop thought. But presumably I primed myself significantly by the process of meditation to actually drop thought and not get in a panic over it and not get breathless or anxious in any way. That I did just let go of thought. And I did it deliberately. I thought I'll let go of thought. And I sat there and I listened. to the sounds outside. I was in Maharishi's cottage, and I was in the basement, and I could hear the Mali, the gardener, cutting something. And it's like, that was the last thing I heard in my former existence. Then I went through the veil. And I must admit, I cheated. You know, I actually took that extra step rather than just doing what my teacher had told me to do. I did that extra bit. I thought, well, I'm not going to sit here just mumbling around with a mantra. I think I'll let go of the thought. And I think that's why I'm here with Gurudev in this translation. I think I have to have a similar cognition of, I see what he meant. And I've already done that with that particular page, because I put this over to an Indian guy on the roots of TM, and he basically almost laughed in my face. And I thought, oh, well, yeah, I've obviously got it around my neck. And I went back and I had another look, and I looked and I looked and I looked. And I was talking to Sybil earlier, and I think she thinks I'm quite thorough in my investigation, the way that I work, my methodology. And I kept bloody working at it. I wasn't going to give up. And I thought, oh my God, it's there on that page. You don't have to look somewhere else. It's not an allusion to something else. He's just said it. And it's just in its infancy, you know. I know it's a bit tantalizing, but it is to me too. I'm not trying to get you guys to buy a book. You know, I'm trying to actually like pull you in to the actual space and say, well, we've heard Maharishi's version of the teachings. We've experienced those teachings, and we've got what we've got out of it. I don't think we'd be here right now if we got nothing out of it. I think we'd have all walked away. And for me, I find transcendental meditation, the way I do it, which I think it's fairly consistent with the way I was taught, very useful. You know, I do.
I'd love to hear what Professor Rob has to ask, and perhaps bounce back and forth between Delana and Rob. Rob, would you go ahead? You have to unmute yourself.
Well, first, a very simple question. What happened with the tiger? Did it recover and then it was a nice tiger? Or give us the closure on the tiger, mate.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I don't have his address, but he didn't die. No, he just went off. Because I mean, I'd love to make up a story to fill in there, but Gurudev did hang out with tigers. There seems to be no doubt about that. But I don't think he was making a big thing about it. I don't think he was like saying, I am the tiger man, I have pet tigers or whatever. Somebody insinuated that the other day, that Tom Knowles, I believe, had let it be known that Gurudev had tigers living with him for 3 years. So it's the first I heard about it. I just think he was able, as you and the rest of us are, of getting on okay with each other. He was okay with getting on with carnivores. It's not much of an answer, but yeah, the tiger was fine. But
well, yeah, that's the payoff in the story. Tiger went to Gurudev, it lived, and the tiger quit eating people. So he was,
yeah, that's the implication.
So
yes.
Okay,
yes.
I got closure on that. Frankly, I am sort of amazed, first of all, as you were, that Gurudev would be into Jyotish. And I mean, I presume if you're connected with Brahman, you're not consulting soothsayers, you're not worrying about the planets, you know that you spontaneously do the right thing. So that's a little bit disturbing to me.
As we were taught through transcendental meditation, you don't need any other bits and bobs, that this will do you fine. And so you think, well, that would have been his message, Gurudev's message, because you're thinking that this is a distillation of what Maharishi was taught. I don't think it is. I suppose I'm almost saying it, but I don't think that Maharishi had the full picture. I think he knew what he knew, and I think he's been tremendously useful in the world at large, but I don't think he knew the whole assembly, because he wasn't a pupil for that long. And the strange thing, before anybody points it out, is that none of his pupils seem to have got the whole story. They're a bunch of arguing people. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing what I have done by doing this research, is I found a lot, the hotbed of arguments that were going on, yeah, well, I don't know how much to say about that, but it seemed that Gurudev wasn't able to pass on his mantle, if you know what I mean. That if he had 52 cards in the pack, people got 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, and they were lucky to get those. I don't think he managed to sort of get his legacy over to the next generation.
Well, another thing I find puzzling is the idea that people should be doing yagyas. It seems to me the whole point of the exercise is to go within and not do yagyas. So I also find that a bit disequilibrating, that he's advocating people doing yagyas, particularly when we know that the TM movement has ripped people off for countless zillions of pesos, paying for yagyas. I mean, all this.
I think that is a real problem. But one shouldn't equate what Gurudev was teaching in 1944 with what Maharishi was teaching in 1984. And since I've come out with my remarks about the Devata, the only people who have responded to me, well, most of the people that have responded to me, are people who practice the Siddhi course, which is Maharishi's interpretation. And Gurudev was very, very strenuous about his discouragement from anybody doing Siddha. So, you know, there's a kind of like twist on these things. I'm not against Maharishi, what he taught and what he said, but there seems to be points at which it's not quite meshing with what Gurudev said. And I think it can prejudice one against what Gurudev was teaching and what he was practicing. I think he was the real deal. And I think largely, and it sounds like I'm an apologist for him, but I think largely it's in the eye of the beholder. That's where I come to. It's like, I don't think it's possible that when one sees him as like supporting something that one will be against, that one is seeing it correctly, that there's a whole lot more, you know, if you know what I'm saying. Anybody know what I'm saying?
Paul, can I ask you something, Paul?
Yeah.
Paul, I know you find yourself an unlikely candidate to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
With a father as a physicist, and you're a wide open, right brain, free thinker. You're so creative and unassuming, but you did have that experience with those goddesses in your meditation, and you did have that experience of transcending. And for you, that was enough. You'd already gotten the package on. You've inferred that. And what I'm asking you is, what do you think of divine timing? In that maybe this is the time for Gurudev's real teaching to come out, if that's possible. And because we couldn't have appreciated it before. As Westerners, Maharishi came and we became so rigid. Twice a day, this many minutes, add this on, that technique, spend this money, go to this course. It was endless. And, you know, a whole international movement was born out of that. And where do we stand today? None of us feels that we're enlightened. I mean, what the definition of that is, I don't even know. And now you're saying Gurudev didn't even talk about that directly. So it sounds to me, just from what I'm hearing from you so far, he himself personally chose to be in the forest, to be with nature. And he drew from that for decades. That is a real lesson. We're destroying that. We don't have that opportunity for ourselves. But that's what he chose. And he became an empath that he could even interact with tigers. That says everything. And the
and
message
not just tigers, anything, yeah.
Well, the message is within the metaphor is my point. If we look for intellectual guidelines, well, the first path, the second, the third, we're going to get lost instantly. What it is perhaps he couldn't pass on the mantle because every individual had their own path and had to tailor it for themselves. And, you know, I mean,
and there's a further reason for that, and this is another big surprise, that most of his followers, including his prime disciple, were people who were discontented with their home life. They'd left home because they were pissed off with home life, and they were revolutionaries. And that's another shock. It's like they were all in the quit India, that's what it was called, wasn't it? They were all politically motivated people. They were not peaceniks. They were not people who were going to go and spend time in the jungle. I'm 100% with you about being an empath to that thing, to nature. And I think that is the way forward for the human race. I'm completely unequivocal about that.
What is the way forward for the human race, Paul?
What is the way?
No, I
listen to Jeff Beck, the guitarist. No, I mean, if there is a way forward, it's to appreciate, as Delana is indicating, our place in the scheme of things, the beauty of nature, to be subordinate to it, to be empathic to it, not to lord over it in the way that we do and destroy it. You know, I mean, you know, a bit of humility wouldn't go amiss. I don't know, I'm not a prophet, but it's interesting what Delana was saying about perhaps this is the right time, and something about my own personal history. And she said, well, you know, you must think you're an unlikely carrier of this entirely. But then I was the last person who would want to go hitchhiking to India. You know, why would I want to do that? I enjoyed just getting stoned in London. Why would I want to risk everything and hitchhike to North Africa with my girlfriend and have her be a nuisance all the time by being so pretty, and all these Arabs want to know too much about her, you know? It's like, why would I have done that? If I was going to do something like that, I'd get an aeroplane, you know? I'd get a nice ticket. I'd sit there and I'd take it easy. Why would I want to hitchhike to India? Why would I want to get hooked up and start learning Sanskrit and all the rest of it? I mean, it's just too weird. I'll tell you what, when I went to India the second time, I came back and I was trying to explain to my mum where, this is a personal thing, okay, where I'd been, and I hadn't got an atlas, and I needed an atlas to show a map and say, this is North India, this is where I was, this is where I was trying to get to, and I couldn't do it. And I found a book on the shelf that was a gazetteer, and it was my paternal grandfather's gazetteer, and it was just a list of places like you get in the back of an atlas. Boring, except that a lot of them were underlined on one page here and there. And I started to find a pattern in the way that they were underlined. They were places that I just tried to go, or did go, most of them. But that's a bit peculiar because they're all in a very specific part of India. And to the best of my knowledge, my paternal grandfather had never been to that area. Why would he have been interested in it? And why was I interested? So there, you know, this thing about, well, I'm here and I don't think I should be here because I think somebody much more, I don't know, schooled. I mean, I didn't go to university. I wasn't going to be asked for that. Somebody who's actually done the course, you know, who's actually a good scholar and all the rest of it. And it's very ironic that it's me. And I think it's because I used to turn on, and I think that is the bridge. I think it's like, well, actually, a lot of people are very moral and they're very self-regarding for being moral. and there's a lot of injunctions against taking this or doing that. And I was the one who didn't listen to any of those injunctions and got lit up on acid. And then I stopped. That's it. Okay, fine. I've done it. I can see what that's about. And then I got lit up on meditation. And I think that for me, that's the explanation. It's like, it's not an intellectualism. It's not even an interest in gurus. I think I told one of you, wasn't it, Brian? I hadn't got the least bit interested in gurus. You know, that might come as a surprise to one or two of you. Perhaps not. I'm pretty irreverent, aren't I?
Paul, if you look at the movement today, if you look at the TM movement today, it's run by people who are so rigid, who are very proud of their position and practice, and yet they're not expansive personalities. They're not creative. When you talk about how the ashram was filled with disciples who was arguing all the time, that's really exciting, because the opposite reality are always interacting. There was an agreement. When there's all that agreement and conformity, where is the growth? Where's the individuality? It seems like we're being called now to become individuals, our own rishis, our own Ganges. And that's not easy when you've spent your whole life immersed in this system where you must always do it such a way, wear this, wear that, eat this, eat that. I mean, we're coming out of that now. And the openness that you've lived with all your life, perhaps, is what puts you in the position of dealing with this fourth book. That's it. I'm going to shut up now. Sorry.
One of the things that happened was that I got like an email or a message from Miguel. And Miguel had been, where have you gone? Oh, you're over there now. Miguel was in the movement. I think he was in Switzerland or somewhere like that. And he was like my alter ego. He was the one that was behaving himself and was educated. And he also liked the music. And I think he probably also liked turning on. I'm not going to go there. But he was more youthful and energetic and probably a little bit crazy. And he found himself as interested as I've been, but he found himself like not squared with the way that the movement was running then. So he had his conflict well ahead of a lot of people because he was there and he represented certain free thinking values and he expected to be listened to, and he wasn't properly. And I think it was partly meeting with Miguel and hearing his stories that kind of made me realize that I've been listened to, because I had a specific reason for writing the bio of Maharishi. One was because they were gossiping so much at work. I had to be doing something to redirect my mind from these people that were gossiping. And I really, really mean that. It was doing my head up badly. And from day one, when I started to write the book, it just disappeared. It was like, where did all the gossips go? I couldn't hear anybody. And I also, when I had that thought, a whole load of lights went on in my head. I don't know if you've ever had a lot of neon lights over the head of you. It's a bit overpowering. Well, that's what happened when I thought of writing that book. My whole head was filled with neon light. And I thought, that was a powerful thought you just had, buddy. And the first publisher that I went to wanted to put me under contract almost straight away. So that was quite a powerful inspiration. And I suppose, coming back to Miguel, I think I've partly written that book to, as I say, get rid of the gossips out of my head. I'd also written it to celebrate the free thinkingness of Maharishi, because I think he was a free thinker. He was an individual. He was a rebel. He wasn't the way that people want to portray him as a traditionalist, anything but. He was very, 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 very rebellious. And a part of why I wrote it was to try and get through to people who were in the Transcendental Meditation movement, who needed a bit of encouragement to think for themselves more, because I could see that vice-like grip that Maharishi had on people. This is the way you do it. Here is your checking notes. You must know every single word perfect. And I did those checking notes, and I thought, oh wow, you know, and like it wasn't good enough that you had a general sense of it. You had to have it exact, and it doesn't meet with my my character. I like to get a sense of something. I don't need to be that exact. And I think that Miguel, knowing that Miguel had been touched by that book, and knowing that he had got negative reactions by some people that he worked with in the movement, I think it had an effect on him talking with me, and it had an effect on me talking with him. And I think we formed some, you know, if I was to try and relate this in 100 years' time to a panel of aliens or something, I'd say that me and Miguel meeting was a point of change in the timeline. Up to that point, I've been working on my own. From the moment that Miguel shared his stories and we had some sort of dialogue, I think that changed things. That's what I would say. And he's gone on and explored and explained and teamed up with people in the way that he has. And I've stayed out of orbit because to me, I was never really, I don't know people in the movement. I don't know people who meditate very much. You know, again, I'm shooting myself in the foot or whatever, but I tend to mix with just ordinary people, local people who feed the ducks and you know, like head cases on the street. Oh, whoa, you know, and they're kind of ranting at me or something. I don't know normal people who sit down and meditate and burn incense and things like that. I kind of wish I did, and it's nice to hang out with you guys, albeit in this advanced way. But I think we're all working in our own ways, and I think that my work was a kind of particularly freak event. It took me away from drugs. It took me away from rock. It took me into being a scholar, which I hated the idea of being a scholar or a writer. I mean, complete anathema. I don't consider it groovy or cool or anything. It's like, oh no, how dull that person must be to spend their time with books all the time. And that's what I've been doing. Isn't that sad? But I do still have guitars. I still have lots of funny Indian musical gears, and I could bring them in here and I could do something. I haven't given up on the idea of returning to what I was doing before I was interrupted. But I do think that this project with Maharishi doing his story and now Gurudev, I think it's more significant than my little kind of world of pleasing myself strumming or picking out some. I think it's more important because I think that there's a lot of suffering in the world, and I think that I don't suffer anything like what most people do. And that's not just because I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, because I wasn't. I've known deprivation, I've known not having money, I've known hardships, I've known illness, all that sort of crap. But basically, I don't really have anything to complain about in life other than losing teeth. You don't want to hear about that. But that's it, you know. And I live a very privileged life, and it feels extremely privileged to be working and riffling through and translating and trying to suss out a Gurudev, because he's possibly the most interesting human being I could possibly be studying. And I totally agree with Robert, is hang on a minute, he believed that, or he was recommending that. It lurches my brain, but I do know that I trust him. I trust Gurudev. Yeah. And I said earlier,
Sibylla's been waiting a little while. Sibylla, go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is a very simple question from Joe, who's disappeared earlier, and he doesn't know why he's disappeared. He thinks that Brian kicked him out, but Brian didn't.
No, excuse me a moment.
Anyway, Joe asks, what?
I need to put you on pause for a moment. Just one moment.
My kiln is saying error, and it's going beep, beep, beep. Error. So there's no temperature. Where the temperature shows,
Oh, that's all
it
right.
says ARR. It looks a bit worrying.
No.
Well, it says error. So why it's beeping.
Well, you don't need to do anything.
Right. Okay.
I'll come and deal with it soon.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right.
Error.
Does anybody know anything about kilns?
I used to.
Well, Kathy, come and show your face.
You're looking worried.
Come on.
Hello.
Hi, Kathy. Can't see you.
Hello. Hi.
Oh, there you are.
Hello.
Beautiful.
Kathy's got a load of stuff in the kiln.
Yep.
And she's waiting to tomorrow to see the upshot of all her lovely things that you put in the kiln.
Yeah.
And the kiln, the controller, instead of telling her what the temperature is, it's saying error. So she's getting a bit anxious.
I would sleep over it and wait till tomorrow.
Or would you turn off the electricity and put it back on again?
Is the kiln still on?
Yeah.
Then I wouldn't do that.
I would turn it off and turn it on.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's put
quite
it to
often
vote.
it won't hurt it.
It won't hurt it. And one thing about this controller is it carries on from where you left it. It's got an inbuilt mechanism.
Okay, in that case,
reverting to zero.
In that case, that's great. Yeah.
So go and turn it on.
In that case,
and turn it on.
Off and on.
Yeah.
And then get shanty.
Yeah, I get really anxious about it.
And
I'm not used to using
don't resort to drink.
But it says error, and it's making this beepy noise, going beep, 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 and I'm a bit anxious about it, so I'm going to go and sort it out.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck. We're all keeping our fingers crossed.
Okay, so where were we?
So Joe, who disappeared earlier, simply had the question what Gurudev's name was before he became a recluse.
Okay, it was Rajaram Mishra.
Rajaram Mishra. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Paul, now you've disappeared. You've gone off camera.
Oh yeah, well that was because Kathy came in, wasn't it?
Yeah, there you go.
Good.
That's
yeah, but I'm glad she came in. I'm glad she shared her anxiety. So you see what I have to put up with. I have to now be tech support for a potter.
Judith, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, did I hear you say that Gurudev did not approve of the siddhas?
Good question. He acknowledged that it was relatively easy to obtain siddhas, but he challenged the idea that it was something to aim for. It would be something that you would acquire quite naturally, and it wasn't something to aim for at all. He said it on different occasions, and he quoted Patanjali as sort of saying that you could get siddhas from various in various ways, and including taking drugs. And as soon as I suggested that it was drugs, somebody corrected me and said that, well, what was the Hindi word? Oh, he was referring to herbs. And it's like drugs, okay, drugs through herbs. So, we're back to that again. I think he, in that respect, I think he was quite easygoing. I think he was quite Catholic. Is that, if you're having an experience, you're having an experience. But I think it surprised me a huge amount that Maharishi went into teaching things to do with powers. It's when I walked, really. I'd already walked when the World Plan team came to London because they were so obnoxious and pushy. But when I heard that people were actually walking through walls and materializing through, I thought, oh, is this for real? You know, I mean, it's, as an 8-year-old, you really groove on it, but a bit later in life, you kind of a bit skeptical about it. And then there never was any evidence that anybody was getting apples or walking through walls. And as somebody who has actually crawled under a door on acid, I kind of put it in perspective. It's like, well, whatever, you know, they're kind of like going through whatever they're going through. But
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think I've done your question justice, but there are quotes from Gurudev about siddhis, and they certainly don't have him portraying that you should go in search of them. The opposite is that they would go in search of you. That he indicated that, I'm paraphrasing him, that they would trail after you as if they were minions. And again, it sounded like he was an extraordinary individual. I can't size him up against, say, Ramakrishna or Vivekananda or Maharishi or Aurobindo or anybody. It's like he had his own very, very separate message. And as Delana has pointed out, perhaps that's got something to do with the fact that he was a forest dweller. And I think that's everything, personally. And I always expected to find that, being somebody who's massively attracted to jungles myself, or Indian jungles. I kind of had an empathy there. I'm thinking, well, yeah, the answer lies with the jungle. So that's a big surprise that it's jungles and subtle beings. But watch this space, you know, I mean, anybody of you can contact me privately and say, well, I was listening to you. I didn't want to say, I didn't want to put up my hand or whatever, but I've got some information that would be useful and I'd like to hear it. I just, you know, I'm just a bit in a limbo about it. I don't expect to stay in a limbo. I don't think that I've been taken this far from, you know, having to hitchhike to India to get involved with the meditation, to everything else, just to be left in the lurch at this point in the middle of translating. I am expecting to crack the code somewhere. And I think part of that is within myself. And I think that since I've been working on the Gurudev project, my meditations have gotten more fulfilling, if you want. They seem to kind of be less important to me and more profound. Like many people, I kind of keep a weather eye on them, and I've increasingly lost that idea of keeping a weather eye on them, and often are just shocked that I'm just sitting there not in a catatonic state, but in a totally, like, I am totally stoned state. It's like I cannot move. I'm not even having a thought. I'm hardly breathing. I can't get up. And like 5 minutes goes, 10 minutes goes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And I'm going, oh, and I suddenly get a thought. Oh yeah, I've got to do so-and-so. And then that breaks it. And that's rather nice. And I'm not saying it never happened before, but I think that working on these translations is having a kind of like, you know, I kind of feel that I'm getting a personal gain out of it, which has got nothing to do with translation, which is no use to any of you, and it's a lot of blah blah. But what I'm saying is that I think that the guy had something going for him that way beyond learning about meditation or learning about this or learning about it. There's something about his life which was singular to him, which I don't think he conveyed to his followers, or else they wouldn't have been arguing the way they did. I mean, they've been arguing in court ever since. I mean, it's like, I'll give you an instance. Shortly after the reading of the so-called will, they took legal action between them. I mean, like all of them, like basically charged off to get somebody else as Shankaracharya, anybody but Shantanand. Only 1 out of 44 of the disciples were there at Shantanand's appointment. It's quite significant. There was a huge uprising in the ashram, and there was legal stuff going on, even at that time. One of the swamis, you like this, one of the swamis, a guy called Swami Dandi Swami Advaitanand, actually locked up Gurudev's ashram totally and chained it up so nobody could go in. They actually had to break into the ashram. They had to break into the throne room in order to anoint and get Shantanand Shankaracharya. That is something that hasn't actually seeped out into the news, isn't it? I mean, it really was quite severe.
Rob has been waiting to ask a follow-on question. I'm fascinated to hear what he has to ask.
Well, I don't know. I'm sort of surprised by urging people to be reading the Puranas in order to find out the truth. I mean, I'm pretty post-Hindu, dog. Somehow, I don't think reading the Puranas is going to get us where we want to go. And you seem to be suggesting that that's what Gurudev is suggesting. Go read the Puranas.
Well, he was suggesting that to his audience then, yes.
Well, where would you say that leaves people now, that everyone should be reading the Puranas?
Well, I'm not
personally, I think they'd be better off
watching. But that's two-sided. Do you think I need to look at them in order to find my answers?
Because that's what it seems like Gurudev is suggesting. That's where the answer lies. So,
but I've already read them. I spent an inordinate time reading Puranas. I find it hard to think that my next step is to read those. But I hear you. I'm getting that.
Well, I'm not. I'm at the opposite end of the spectrum.
The
Puranas. Go take a walk in the forest. Paul, would you help me understand exactly what it is that you feel stuck on? You mentioned the threefold path, the material.
No, I'm not stuck on that.
Supernatural. What are you stuck on? What's holding you up?
Okay, right from the start, when I was looking into what Maharishi was saying and looking into the hidden aspects of his teaching and finding out that he was actually referring to Devata. He was actually in some of his early lectures in 1959 and 1960, actually enumerating Devatas and naming them. And he was also, when he would ask somebody, you know, when he was going to initiate them, and this was back in 59, 60, he would actually ask them who their favorite deity was.
Which is exactly what Dana Sawyer told us the Shankaracharyas are doing today. They ask you what personal deity is.
Sure. And that's kind of freaked me out because I don't come from, like you, I think, you're post-Hindu. I'm reasonably comfortable with Hindu to a point. But the idea of accepting that, I'll go back to what I was going to say. I don't like the idea of making anybody subordinate to me, okay? So the idea of actually praying or worshipping an entity in order to do my work for me kind of goes against the grain. I'm a bit far left of that. I do my own shit, you know. I don't actually go and ask some being to kind of go sweep the lawn or whatever. I don't have a lawn. That's a bad example. Sweep the front yard. Well, Kathy does that anyway. Oh my God. So where are we? No, I have a political problem.
Well, Paul,
that answers
help me get closer to exactly what's holding you up then. I'm struggling to get a grip on, if you're post-Hindu, what's keeping you from just translating this thing? Because there's weird stuff.
I'm continuing with the translation. Don't worry. I am. It's just a personal thing. It's just, you go through things, don't you? You get a head cold, or you get a bad phone call, or Kathy comes in and says the kiln's not working. Stuff happens. But this is just a bit bigger than that. It's like the recognition that this guy managed to survive living in jungles. And there's just this faint message coming through to me that he managed to survive because he had help from the supernatural. And you might be able to flurry over that, but I can't. I find that's a game changer. It really is for me. I'm happy about it, but I have to now confirm that it's true. Like any physicist, once they seize an idea and they say, do you know what? I think I've seen an active principle here. I've seen something that causes something else to happen. They have to replicate it. They have to see for themselves. And that's what I have to do. And I'm ill-equipped to do so, Robert. I'm not going to go to the forest and wait for somebody to bring me some food. I'm not going to take that risk. So, as I say, answers on postcards, guys. Yeah, maybe there's somebody here who knows how it's done. I do think that he knew how it was done, and I think that he took that.
Can I interrupt one more time?
Yeah,
please?
sure.
I'm looking at the handbook.
Yeah, good.
And it says switch kiln off.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yes.
I turned it on.
Yes.
I turned it off and then I turned it on again.
That's what I wanted you to do, yeah.
Yeah. And I saw the temperatures going down.
Yes.
But I've since looked in the handbook and error, any error, different errors, it just says switch kiln off, ! So I'm going to go turn it off.
But that's what you did do.
Yeah, but then I turned it back on again, didn't I?
Are you catching? I'm dealing with the kiln right now. And now you're going to see me with a pair of goggles on. So, what error was it?
Error 1.
Error 1.
But any error.
Where is error 1?
On that there.
Actually, these are not reading glasses. These are computer glasses. Oh, now I can see it. It's not increasing as required. Kiln has been on full power for more than has not written by at least so-and-so degrees. Possible causes are kiln door or lid not closed properly. Heater element failure could be. Well, looks like we might have to get a new element for the.
Well, should I go and turn it off? Because that's what it says, turn it off.
But you have turned it off.
But no, I turned it back on again. You said turn it off and turn it on, so I did.
Yeah, and you noticed that it's going down.
Yeah.
Well, that's all right.
So I'm going to turn it off.
You can turn it on.
Off.
But everything is doable.
Turn it off. Yeah.
Everything is doable.
Yeah, I just want my stuff to be okay.
It won't have done it any harm.
Good. I'm going to.
Do you know what temperature it got to?
Yeah, I wrote it down, 8.3 something whether I wrote it down.
That's a healthy amount.
Yeah.
Do not panic.
It might have gone to the right amount and come down. Let's hope.
Do not panic.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. I'm back. Where were we?
Rob was.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Delana.
I just want to ask you, could there be a message within the mystery? You say that he couldn't pass his teachings on to his disciples, but maybe that's just what he was saying, in that we can't hope to attain where he was at, but each within ourselves in this particular life have to find what works for us. And it may not be in one set way. Maybe some will do yagya. Maybe some will get support without yagya. I sat in for months on sessions with Maharishi Jyotishi, and he recommended yagyas to people and they got them done. I got some done. But sometimes he would say, very seldom, you don't need gems, you don't need yagya, you don't need a guru. Now that hardly ever happened, but it did happen. So maybe what he was saying was, for most people, or for many people, you know, whatever, get a yagya done, because it'll speed things up. You'll get more support. You'll clear stress out faster if you want to. You don't have to. And other people, not even in our movement, doing Buddhism or whatever they're doing, Catholic, whatever's, they can develop the virtues, the values that Gurudev talked about, that we saw not followed in our own teachers, such as greed and lust. The ironies are just endless. And what I'm asking you is it possible that there really is no one formula at all? Yagya, not yagya. And also what I want to know is the L.B. Shriver translation, where Gurudev talks, you know, quite a few principles come through. What do you feel about the legitimacy of that? I know that a lot of his unfinished work was handed on to you. Doug Hamilton wrote about that. And I just wondered, because I only have 3 books on Gurudev: Strange Facts About a Great Saint, The Whole Thing, The Real Thing, and the L.B. Shriver book, Sweet Teaching.
I didn't do any of those, did I? No.
No, you didn't do any of those.
Right.
So
Okay. I'll count you through those. The one, did you say The Whole Thing, The Real Thing?
Yeah.
That, I know the guy who did it. We had some link up. He translated the Hindi biography of Gurudev. Okay, that came out in 1965, and it was a result of stuff that had come out in the newsletter, in the ashram newsletter. It was kind of a collection of reflections that, strangely enough, mainly came from Gurudev himself, because, you know, like we'd like to believe, he actually told stories about his own life. So we actually found out about his life from him, which I think is a very good and direct way. But what Thingy Bob, who wrote Whole Thing, Real Thing, it's a very misleading title. It isn't the whole thing, and it isn't the real thing. He also called it a transcreation. A transcreation is not the whole thing or the real thing. It's a well-meaning approach to the Hindi. And he took a lot of liberties, and there's a lot of inaccuracies, and there's a lot of stuff missing. Okay. And I'm not knocking it. Okay. It's just statements of fact. And I know that the owner of that book, and I've discouraged him from bringing it out. And I've told him why. And he hasn't brought it out ever since. Okay. So the next one is L.B. I can't pronounce his other name. Is it Shriver or whatever? Pardon?
Shriver.
Shriven. He was very well-meaning, and he was helpful to me personally, because I no longer had my copy of one of the Hindi books. It had got lost, and he provided me with a photocopy. So I think he was a really nice guy. You talk about his translation. Unfortunately, LB could not translate Hindi. It's not that he was poor at it; he just couldn't. He hadn't learned Hindi, and he couldn't translate it. What he did was he got Indian guy or guys to translate it for him, and then he made various alterations to it. And he also worked with Cynthia Humes, who was an expert Hindi translator, and she made her own translation. She made her own translation that she showed to me before I published mine. But although I looked at hers, I didn't base any of my translations on her work. And I hadn't seen his. And I worked from what was on the page. I worked from the Hindi, and I translated it word by word, which is why sometimes it makes difficult reading, because That's the way Gurudev spoke. Often he called himself we, that can throw you. And I actually translated it as we. So the poor reader of my works has to put up with that. But I consulted with an English teacher, a former English teacher, who was also one of Maharishi secretaries, and he said, you're doing the right thing. You're actually making the reader think. And that's why, so you can blame him for that. So what other was the question? Oh yeah, the different paths. I think you're onto a right thing, and I'm really glad we've had this chat this evening, because basically I gave you all to know that Gurudev had made this pact with his own mother. When you make a pact with your mother, it's a bit different than make it with just some Joe down the street. And he'd made this pact not to stick out his paw for alms, that if he ever got fed up with being a sadhu, he would go back home. He didn't want to go back home, but he didn't want to beg. Therefore, he needed, and you're exactly right, the path that he took, which in order to not reach out to another human being, you'd have to reach out to the supernatural. If anybody needed to reach out to the supernatural, it was him. I don't need to. I'd go and ask Kathy. I'd say, any chance of a better cheese on toast? I know that makes me sound stupid, but I'm saying we are interdependent. We like relationships. We like feeling needed. I enjoyed being asked to come and join you. I had some reservations, but it is a privilege to have a whole bunch of people listening to all the baloney that goes through your head. And I'm interpersonal. Gurudev didn't look at life like that. He wasn't interested. He was very remote. He pointed out to people that he wasn't doing them a favor. You know, people wanted to make out that he was giving them his blessing. And he pointed out that he wasn't. He was just doing his job. He was very, very remote, you know? And we're not like that. And it's taken you to say that, Delana. It's like we're all on our own path. And I personally I don't feel I need assistance. And that's a really good point you've made. But I still got to crack how he did it. Don't I? Or maybe not. Maybe not. But
Judith,
just a spontaneous remark that everyone will probably think is really silly, but he sounds like someone from another planet and like a psychic medium. He doesn't sound like, you know, what we normally think of as a spiritual teacher.
One of the questions that Brian I asked him not to read me the questions, but we came to a pact that he would read me a few in order to kind of like just put a few suggestions. And one of the questions he asked me is, how did Gurudev get on with eminent politicians of his day, like Gandhi, etc., etc.? Well, he did interrelate with them because he was a Shankaracharya, and that's like being the Archbishop or more. Then, like, that's a pretty high position to take. And being a politician is a pretty low position, even though we hear more about politicians. It's like, yeah, but they're pretty here today and gone tomorrow. And long before Mahatma Gandhi became known that much in the West, I think, I'm blah-blahing now. Anyway, the story goes that Mahatma Gandhi was being hassled to go and see Gurudev. He was being hassled by Radhakrishnan, is that his name? Big politician. He's a poet and a Hinduist, and he was very well thought of. And it was him that called Gurudev Vedanta incarnate, for the record. And he was hassling along with somebody else, another politician, for Mahatma Gandhi to go and see Gurudev. And Mahatma Gandhi, he was called a Mahatma, and he was very judgmental about Mahatmas, okay? And he was kind of disparaging them. As he walked along the street on his way to see Gurudev, he was saying, like, the world, India would have become independent far, far sooner if the Mahatmas got behind the independence thing, the Quit India scheme and all the rest of it. And he went to see Gurudev and they did their pranams, they did their bowings and that. And without any further ado, Gurudev started to launch into him about how useful Mahatmas are and how they help each other. They, like, for instance, the guy's on the side of the street, he's got cholera, that the other people, the Mahatmas, will come and help out and that. And it freaked Mahatma Gandhi out because he hadn't actually conveyed what he was thinking. He got picked up, like you were saying, psychic medium, and Gurudev was renowned for doing that to everybody all the time, that people would go in there with questions and he would just say it, and it would all get resolved. And I mean, for some of us that sounds a bit fanciful, but it really was claimed by an awful lot of people in a lot of different ways. And it's nice to think that Mahatma Gandhi got it as well. I mean, I think he did the world a lot of good, Mahatma Gandhi, but it's quite nice to see other people's come up sometimes, isn't it? That he's going blah, 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 and he picked up for it. I think it's fun.
So did Gurudev take an active part in the independence movement?
Yes, he did. He chaired a committee, and his ashram newspaper put out like proclamation of, you know, like, get behind the anti-Hindu code. Yeah, he was active, as were his people. I mean, Kapatri was very active politically. He set up a political party. What was his name? Swarupanand, that TMers love to hate. He was actually known as the revolutionary sadhu. Before he was with Gurudev, he used to go around with Gurudev, and he's the guy in that picture with the dirty great trident and long hair, and he looks massively frightening, and he was known as the revolutionary sadhu. Even his own ashram don't know that that's him in that photograph. It was told to me through the family of the people who gave me the photograph. And yeah, the people around him were agitators. Surely Gurudev wouldn't have allowed agitators around him if he didn't want them. I think Maharishi was an agitator at that time. I think he's very quiet about it now. Well, he's particularly quiet about it now because he's not here. But I think he was a part of that agitation. I think they all were. And as a Britisher, I take exception to it all. We're not that bad.
So what else was Gurudev's responsibilities as Shankaracharya?
Self-imposed. I mean, basically, as a Shankaracharya, as everybody knows, the position of Shankaracharya was set up by Adi Shankara, or Shankaracharya himself, all those years ago, what, 2,500 years ago, they say, rough rule of thumb. And he set up the idea of having one central monk who was like a magnet for people to come and see in each of the four points of the compass in India, so that he set up Dasnami, the Dandi Swami idea, that people would circulate round those 4 monasteries. He tried to revive Hinduism. Not everybody's going to be pleased to know about the Hinduism, but that's what he revived 2.5. There'd been a period of Buddhism, and he basically wanted to turn the tide of people either going to Buddhism or to being just Rigvedic ritualists. He wanted them to think it through and to believe certain things. Now, the Shankaracharya is actually embodying all the teachings, what they call the smarta teachings of Adi Shankara. So one of the smarta teachings, the fundamental one, is that all gods are seen as equal. So you can worship Vishnu or Shiva or Ganesh or the mother goddess, or the sun in equal way. You should be able to see that the one is the other. It was a way of teaching I used to think was just a clever technical way of producing an assimilation of the population and getting everybody to kind of have a rough agreement. I'm not so sure now, because as I said, in this revision process of actually thinking that we are talking about actual supernatural entities who are to be treated on the same level. But that's where the diversion comes. That's where the duality is, whether one takes it as a philosophical teaching or one takes it as an actuality. And to a large degree, I'm with Delana, not just because it's an easy get out for me not to have to process so much, but also it's what I felt for the last 50 years. It's like we really need to get in harmony with nature, with ourselves, that we're not looking for a teaching. I wasn't looking for a guru. I'm not looking for a scripture. I'm certainly not looking to be obedient to some antiquated laws that put women in a shitty position. So yeah, I have massive problems of processing the idea of going back to a period of history which is probably left alone. I'm revising that. I'm saying, well, hang on, this guy didn't think so. He wanted to revive the whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel. And he's seen as a realized person. I need to process this very carefully. So on the one hand, I'm inclined to agree with you, Delana, and we just have to find our own personal version, the answers to our own personal life. And on the other side, I say, yeah, but I might be overlooking something here. I think I need to continue this examination, but not drive myself nuts. You know, I'm kind of more interested at the moment in what's wrong with Cather's Kiln as to whether I've got to kind of like, you know, I'm a practical person. I kind of like going to apply myself to practical problems. Perhaps that's why it's good that I'm doing this Gurudev project, that I'm going to bring a fairly even-mindedness. I don't know how even-minded I've come across. I'm probably not as even-minded as I'd like to sound, but I am really honest.
No, you sound amazingly even-minded to me. You sound amazingly objective, if that's the word, realistic about the whole project.
Thank you.
Delana.
Well, I think it's really important that you do the work that you're doing, whether or not the public at large would be ready to know in depth what Gurudev left behind and what you think in your research he may have been, because you know, we're all timing out here, and to have this knowledge captured by the awareness of what we do know, what you have studied, I think it's really important. The other thing I wanted to say was that if you look at indigenous cultures, which have been less westernized, much more connected to nature, they're rampant with gods and goddesses. There's no problem with whether or not they exist or not. And they are allowed to have each their own experience. And I'm not speaking of, well, I can only speak of the ones that I've grown up around, which is they don't try to conform so much that this is how this goddess is or that, but they're everywhere. And if you want to tune into it or be a part of it, or it doesn't really matter, you can connect to it or not. They exist because it's all divine. I mean, all that we're doing here is sacred ritual. I mean, I'm getting really spacey with it, but my point is that I think as Westerners, we feel divorced from the mysticism and the metaphor and the whole issue of deities. But we're Westerners. And if you look at Hawaiian culture or other Polynesian cultures or my mother's culture, that's the reality. They never got that divorce. And there's a kind of schizophrenia now with Western culture coming in and saying, no, you know, deal with physics, deal with science, only what you can see. But that's changing as well. So I think you're at a really important intersection here where you can capture something that perhaps will be more valued and shared in the future. Because, you know, Gurudev, as far as run-of-the-mill people, he's not as well known as a lot of other teachers are. I mean, that's been my experience, you know. And so what it's just so amazing to me that there's this information that hasn't yet been collated and coalesced and made available. Look at how old we are.
But one thing to interject there is that who was working on this before me? Do you know?
On what? On the Dev project?
Yeah. Who was doing this project before me? It's open to anyone. And there's 27 participants. Anybody can give me an answer.
No idea.
Wow, Maharishi. He was the only other person that I know of who was handling this project. He joined Gurudev's ashram, having seen him shortly after Gurudev came out of the jungle. He joined his staff, rather impatient to get something done. He inveigled his way into becoming his secretary, and he is largely responsible. Is the person who is responsible, largely speaking, for all the trapping of information. He was asked by Swami Brahmananda to compile a book of discourses and story about Gurudev, which they released in 1947. He did another one in 1951, I think, the end of 1951, another Hindi book. So the two main books about Gurudev, the only two books that came out in Gurudev's lifetime, were both put together by Maharishi. He wasn't called Maharishi then, he was called Mahesh Prasad Ji on the first occasion, on the second time, Brahmachari Mahesh. But he was the one, and he set up the newsletter, which ran for the last 3 years of Gurudev's life. And it was a weekly newspaper, so that's 52 times 3, let you do the maths on that. That's approximately how many publications he made. And each issue had bits and pieces from Gurudev. So it's weird that Maharishi didn't actually publish any of those discourses in all the time. All these buildings went up, all these huge amounts of money was spent on all sorts of things, and they never produced one single book other than his terribly small thumbnail piece of writing that he'd actually written many years before. He hadn't written it in 1965, he'd written it more like 55 or before, I think well before that. And he had it translated by an Indian guy. Anyway, why did he not publish it? Is it because he figured out that you couldn't understand Gurudev, or was it that he couldn't figure out what Gurudev was saying, or what? Because what he actually taught when he first started to teach in 1955 was, it was like an echo of what Gurudev was saying. It was like, if you'd been there and you'd heard some of his public lectures, you might have been able to formulate some of those teachings. Had you been a brahmachari and gone and done meditation checking with people, you would have been able to put together that package. He wasn't a sannyasi. He wasn't a disciple in the way of being taught everything by Gurudev. And he owned up to that. I've quoted these in his biography, that he owned up and said, no, I don't know what mantras Gurudev taught. I don't know all about this. Perhaps he was much better and he was rather self-effacing. So I think his audience, when he was saying those things, said, oh, isn't Maharishi a darling? He's so self-effacing. He always gives credit to Gurudev. But actually, if you read it clearly, he's saying, I don't know. So I think this, when I said earlier that the mantle of Gurudev and his knowledge of mantras, his knowledge of everything, didn't get passed on, I think that was the case. and you know, is it for us to discover it, or has it gone down the Swanee? We don't know.
Well, Paul,
I know Miguel had some questions about that, about the mantras, and where did Maharishi get these mantras, and were they the ones that Gurudev taught? Miguel, come on now.
Here I am. Can you hear me? I'm using the phone now.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're a celebrity. Paul's been talking you
my
up.
phone as well.
So, yeah, that is one of the questions that I have and many in our group have, and we've been talking about it for some time. Where did Maharishi got the mantras, the TM mantras? Was it from Gurudev? Did Gurudev taught those type of mantras? Because reading your books, I don't see anything that point in that direction. It seems that Gurudev talks more about Ishtadevata all the time. What is do you have any new information about it? What is your thinking on that? Thank you.
Well, great. He pointed out that only a guru can know all those mantras. I don't know quite. I think he was referring to a Sadguru. I don't think that Maharishi's ever put himself in that position of saying, I am such a person that I know all those things. When he first started teaching people, and that's very evident, and the evidence is in Beacon Light of the Beacon Light of the Himalayas, which is a reference to Gurudev. He was known as the Beacon Light of the Himalayas. Some of the people that Maharishi taught in 1955 actually give their own little testimonies within the book. It's worth tracking down the book. I've got it online as a PDF, and it's worth reading their testimonies. And basically what is consistent is that he didn't give them the mantras. They already had them. They used their family mantra. As Dana said the other day, the Kula mantra or the Ishtadeva. Or they would just state their preference for a particular god, and then people would know that mantra. He wasn't actually, I don't think that that's what he was bringing to the teaching. What he was bringing was charisma and a methodology about the way that he was instructing people. And I think that initially everybody was an Indian, and he wasn't beleaguered with having to think about a mantra for someone, because they already had favored deities or mantras floating around. It's strange to us as Westerners, we keep using that word Westerner, but it's strange to us who haven't been brought up with mantras, the idea that your family might have favorite gods or favorite mantras, but that seems to be the way of it. I don't think he had a problem coming up with mantras to address Miguel's question until he got to more westernized countries. And then I think he made a simple adaptation of trying to figure out if that person had a god, what sort of god would that be? He actually was asking people in 1959, 1960, what is your favorite deity? And that was in America, you know? Like, I don't think he locked quite into our culture that as quick as we might think he did. I mean, when he first landed, he was staying with Buddhist people, and I think they were from Hawaii. I think it wasn't until he was staying in Hollywood that the full impact of America was really getting through to him, that people didn't have gods, you know? And I think it must have been then, Miguel, that he must have thought, oh, wow, I need to be more systematic. Well, in the Beacon Light of the Himalayas, there's a little verse there, which is out of the Guru Sutra or something. I can't remember. I'm not this good. I'm a bit tired. Okay.
Guru Gita, maybe. Guru Gita,
maybe. Yeah, it sounds right. And there's a verse which encapsulates several mantras, including Om. And I think at least 2 or 3 of them are ones that were subsequently used in TM. So there's an advanced signal that the mantras were, he was publicizing them in that book. I think he was a bit of a, I won't say control freak, but I think he involved himself significantly in whatever was going on, including the production of that book. And I don't think he would have allowed that verse to have appeared in that book if he was self-conscious about it. But it is basically a clue to the selection of mantras. They are ancient and they are in this verse. And I think when he came to Britain, I think he was doing like Gurudev was, and perhaps just advocating Ram. I mean, I think that's the consensus of opinion amongst a few people that I know. That there weren't lots of mantras for Westerners. It was like 1 or 2. I think one for women, one for men. And it was only a little later that he diversified and had this idea about, but I'm not a trained teacher, so I how would I know what I'm talking about? But basically, according to sources that I've read, mantras are chosen by age or whatever, and if that's the case, I think that was a later move. I need to say a few things about Maharishi. I went into this current project with a certain attitude towards Maharishi, partly because of the attitude that's been put on me by the TM movement, how they tried to stop my work, how they tried to sort of get court order on me. And it was very, very unpleasant. And he never kind of reversed that. Maharishi himself didn't say, oh, call off the dogs, you know, get Paul to come out and we'll have a chat. And I still hold it against him. I'm small-minded like that. I hold it against him that he didn't step in and sort things out for me, because it was a very, very unpleasant process. And I hadn't written the book with any measure of unpleasantness towards him. And therefore, I rather ended up despising a lot of the people who were running his movement, and I didn't have a high regard for Maharishi. I had a high regard for his intelligence and a lot of the observations he made, but I was short of like thinking that he was the big dude that I thought he might have been. But working on this project and looking at his disciples like Kapatri, Swarupanand, and others, I kind of think, do you know what? I can see where Maharishi was at. Do you know, I can see that he had to do something for the legacy. He had to do something useful. After all, here's the man who ran the ashram newspaper for 3 years. Here's the man who brought out 2 books on Gurudev. They're the only published works, with a few minor exceptions. There was a magazine going, which I'll divulge at another time. But he was basically doing all the publicity. One can't deny that. And I think that's all he was doing. Once the old man's dead, you know, it's like, what the hell is he going to do? He's got nowhere to work. He's disenfranchised himself by siding with Shantanand. He's got no place in any of their ashrams. There's no point in him working for Shantanand. I mean, like he's a major player now. He's worked for 12 years for the Shankaracharya of Jyotir Math. And what's he going to do? He's unemployed. But more to the point, he's got a burning ambition to be the Shankaracharya, to be the teacher. And he was very, very eloquent. He was very, very knowledgeable. He might not have known so much about mantras. He might not have known so much about yoga. Right. Okay. But he did know his stuff, and he did conquer many, many minds, far more powerful than mine. And he knocked people down like skittles, and they were in awe of him. So I think he did what he could. I'm not talking about how things turned out. and what people view of him, his later life. I'm talking about what he did when Gurudev died, and how quick he went, as far as I can understand. I'm out timing here, I think, but he went, I don't believe he went to Utkarshi to go and meditate, okay? He went there because they were building an ashram there, in a temple. He went there to oversee that project. That's my opinion. And I got that from a snippet in a magazine at the time, that he was undertaking a project to build the ashram there in the temple, which I stated in the 70s. So he didn't go there to meditate. He just happened to meditate while he was there, which makes far, far more sense. It takes away the big story, but it actually makes for a much more realistic story. It's like, well, you would do while you're overseeing the building of something, you'd sneak off and do some meditation, and good for him. And I think he went to the south of India because of his so-called aunt, who was another woman who followed Gurudev, and they went to South India because she was ill, and she went to a hospital in Bangalore, and he went off to see the temples. But I think it was spontaneous. Some people have questioned whether he had an agenda, whether he was setting up something on behalf of his family. I don't know, but I think he did the best he could. He did know a hell of a lot in terms of theory. He was very charismatic. He was holding a light which other people were not. People were very smitten by his presence and very smitten by what he was saying. And I think he tried to hold the mantle of Gurudev, because Gurudev was extraordinarily impressive in a charisma sense to the people who came to see him. Whether or not they all got the message, whether or not they all became nice people, or I mean, to be honest, again, I'm interrupting myself, I found some of his followers very like caught up in the material sense. I mean, Raj Farmer I used to know, and he just wanted to sell and make money out of his, out of his connection, and he wanted to sell books. I mean, his grandson is now selling stuff, and he'll charge people whatever they'll pay for one of those books. It's like, why are you doing that? It's all about money. And I think there is, what I'm saying is that the legacy through Gurudev's disciples and the initiates isn't that impressive, right? That's what I'm saying. And I think that what you guys have been saying is that Maharishi's legacy through his heads of department is not that impressive. So I think there's a consistency here, and I think I'm going back with Delana again, because she's been the most vocal here, is, yeah, but we've got to sort out our own stuff. We've got to reach our own reality and our own assessments and our own get it right for ourselves. And I 100% agree. And I think that's what he was trying to do. Personally, I just think he got engulfed in it. He met the Beatles. He wanted to be a pop star too. I think that's why they gave up on him. Most of them, three out of four, have expressed that they thought he was basically putting them on, really. But they were the Beatles. I mean, they must have known what it means to be a celebrity and being looked up to. And I think Maharishi wanted to be a celebrity. And a lot of people want to be celebrities. Michael Jackson wanted to be a celebrity. Eric Clapton wants to be a celebrity. How many people can you think of who've got a talent, don't want to be celebrities? I don't think he was guilty of becoming a celebrity, but I think that his celebrity choked the message. It went wrong, Perhaps if he hadn't met the Beatles, blah, blah, blah. But I think, Gurudev didn't succumb to that. He became a celebrity and he became more approachable. It didn't make him more fat-headed, it's a kind of reverse position, which isn't me deifying him. It's just an observation. And I think, again, I bow to Delana on this. It's like, I think we really need to figure out our own trips rather than kind of come up with a mass answer for everyone. I think Maharishi tried to do that, and we've all been left wondering, was that one size fit all? And there's a truth about it, but I think we're like the not the cheerleaders, how would you say it, the torch holders now, and the responsibilities on us. Yeah, I do. I think so.
Well, that's it. The question is, where do we go from here? What do we do?
Well, I've got to go and look at the kiln. What about you? I think we can take ourselves too seriously. I'm not, Sybil reassured me earlier that I'm just as much a member of this group as anybody else. And that's a really nice thing to say. But I don't know what people are talking about in terms of what shall we do. And I don't really know that I've got any better answers than anybody else, other than listen to Jeff Beck and Talvin Singh for music, eat lots of samosas and pakoras. I don't know. I don't think there is a universal answer, but if I come up with one, I'll definitely hope to get back to you on it.
Rob Roberts.
Oh, thank you. This might sound all airy-fairy and hippie-ish and everything, and I'm a child of the 60s as well, Paul. But when I think of consciousness, the flow of consciousness, the development and evolution, natural law, it's like I listened to Paul and I've read some of the past stories, and there's a flow to it. I mean, it's like a river. It finds its own course. And it seems that it's come from Gurudev, a bit of a revolutionary or a rebel himself, not wanting to be confined. And it's come through now with Paul's information and people contributing to that, and coming to now this new beginning. It's finding its own channel. And I mean, it's encouraging, that could have been so confined and restricted and hidden away in the jungle, and yet it was brought out. It found its way through Gurudev to us. And I find it encouraging that it's like it says, like what we call this a new beginning, and it's still in its finding its own path. That's it. Thank you.
Can I respond to you? You mentioned how you were also like you were warm to the kind of ideals of the kind of hippie age or something. That's a sort of undertone, I thought, of what you were saying. I had a specific theory about that period because I was really interested in the mechanics of how the psychedelic era, how those thinkers like Leary and Kesey and so forth, Ginsberg, how that emerged and how it sent a huge wave through the planet. I mean, people were wearing beads at the seaside in Britain, people were kind of swept up in what was going on. And when I identified it, I identified that it was just a cluster of relatively few people, that there was a kind of core nucleus, if you want, of people behind it that you could name. You could actually have one side of a piece of paper and you could spell out those people's names, and that was it. And they formed that new beginning. Okay. And when I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm hearing you talking about this is called the new beginning, I'm thinking, well, isn't that precisely what I was thinking? That all you need is a cluster of people who will connect with one another. They're independent, but they will connect with one another. And you've got it all. You've got the strength of every individual in it, their own resources, their own individual take on everything, that they're not in competition. Do you know, nobody, I've been really rather surprised what an easy time you guys have given me this evening. You know, it's like, wow, you're joking. I've actually managed to get through, what is it? It's a phenomenal amount of time, 3 hours, without being heckled and hassled and or cut up or carved up. I think we're kind of like mutually respective. You might not.
We love you.
What?
We love you, Paul.
Ah, that's a lovely thing to say. What I'm saying is we're mutually respected, and that's surely what the ingredients were back in that era. People were not fighting. I wasn't fighting with anybody about ideals or anything. We were coming together, and I was knowing wealthy people and poor people, influential people and people who couldn't influence a fly, rock stars and people who could hardly pick up an instrument. It didn't matter. We were all on a level, do you know? Everything was possible. And I think that wasn't really a spiritual revolution. That was coming from drugs. You know, it's like, it's not very hard to work that out. LSD, you know, amphetamine, hashish. But this isn't, you know, we're all pretty kind of like straight, and we've got something binding us together, or else we wouldn't be here. 26 of us, we had 27 a moment ago, but we wouldn't be here if there wasn't some cohesion, because we're all coming from different spaces, different paths. And I think that, you know, what is the way ahead is like, just hang in there and keep connected, and, you know, go through whatever it is, and as each comes up with a kind of development, to share it and see how it hits on other people. I'm really glad to be a part of it. As I say, I was apprehensive that I would be roasted, you know, and I've survived, unless you're going to do it at the last moment. That did occur to me. Let's save the acid for the last moment. Yeah, I take that.
Oh, I just want to ask you something. You know, the whole thing of herbs, and I hope later we can have you go more into it. Gurudev talked about as far as herbs. They've been around in indigenous cultures for centuries. True. And I think what happened in the 60s was nature, or whoever you want to call it, said, we got to snap these people out. There's nuclear warfare. They got to move forward. What's the quickest way to open them up? Get some psychedelics, some peyote, some LSD.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a fast track to open up people. And the irony is that, you know, since about 2016 or earlier, there's a lot of experimentation going on with people very high up, people in Silicon Valley, Harvard, Stanford.
Did you say psilocybin Valley? Sorry.
Silicon Valley.
That was a joke. Yeah.
Okay, but my point is, I think we've reached another one of these critical times where there has to be a dramatic opening. And I think it's great that Silicon Valley and all these are experimenting, ayahuasca, whatever it is, because if that's all they have, if they haven't been conscious seekers looking into deep knowledge somewhere, then open up. Better than staying in this surface life that's destructive, that they're, especially when they're powerful people. So I think the 60s was a necessity. That was my experience. LSD, all of that, mescaline, and then I found TM. But the thing is, I think the timing is very related. And I want to end with just this one question to you, which is, you know, New Beginnings is a loose affiliation. It's not some big, tight thing where everybody agrees. In fact, one of the best things about this situation is that we can disagree and talk things out, have a little snit here and there, recover, still be friends. It's important to be able to do that in a group. You don't want conformity, because then that creativity stops, right? So here's my question to you. It sounds like Gurudev and Maharishi were polar opposites. Gurudev was reclusive. He had to be pulled out in a way. He didn't want the fame. He didn't want all the fan club and all that. He wasn't trying to propose some big solution to the world. Maharishi couldn't be a Dandi or a Swami. In India, he leaves, he comes to the West, it's wide open territory, and he had to experiment as he went. And I think what I personally want, because I was a true believer, and I would dismiss anything that seemed weird or incongruent for decades. And then I came out and found all about the financial corruption and the sexual exploitation. And I started to demonize him. And I'm trying to reach a balance where I really appreciate him. I can let go. I can know all the dark shit about him, because there's a lot, and about his movement and how he ran it, and then be able to find my own way to reconcile, so that I don't have to carry a lot of upsetness about how he did things, because it was an experiment and he was a genius at it. I mean, but I want to hear more about, I'm curious what Gurudev would have thought of Maharishi's endeavors out here in the West. And maybe that's something that, you know, you could just speculate on for us someday. I mean, Gurudev would have blown his mind if he could have seen some of what went on.
I think that's kind of private, that stuff, because, you know, it's dangerous stuff, isn't it? Especially if there's a tape recorder running. But you know, what we do know is what is recorded about what Gurudev apparently said to Maharishi is that he kind of knew that he got ideas and that he was having to hold him back, you know. I think he knew what was going on. I think he knew what he got on his hands. He allegedly, he knew that he wanted to be the Shankaracharya, and he said something, I don't have it to hand, but he said something like, even if I were to allow you, if I were to make you the Shankaracharya after me, people wouldn't have it, you know. So I don't know if that's misinformation, but it is printed in a book. I've got a book with that, you know, it's in ink, you know, what is one to believe? But I think it's very probable. I mean, Maharishi was very, very confident. One could almost say he was overconfident. Here's a little story about Maharishi that you probably don't know. Maharishi tells the tale of when he went to see Gurudev at a house on the edge of town, which would have been Jabalpur. And he was taken to where Gurudev was, and he waited, and then the headlights came on Gurudev and he saw him, and he was very smitten with this man because he was in the habit of going to see holy men. And for some reason, who knows why, he thought that this guy was really the real deal. Okay, so that's the sort of beginning of the mythologized version of Maharishi's involvement with Gurudev. But what few people seem to know is the second part. Maharishi has said that I saw him in a street parade or a procession. And somebody asked on Roots of TM, how come he's saying that he saw him in the house? And now he's saying that he saw him in the procession. Well, the procession was sometime after the other instance. It was some 2-3 years later. I can't remember. Again, it's in my book. You also read the book. But that's my first ad for the book. 3 hours it's taken me to advertise the book. But now, coming back to the subject, what actually happened was he saw him in a procession, and then he thought, I'll write a poem about him. Okay, fair enough. He was into poetry. And he took that poetry and he took it to where Gurudev was with all his pundits and his followers. And he asked someone, can I read this out loud? And the guy is kind of thinking, he already knew Maharishi as a young man locally. And he's kind of thinking, what on earth is going on? And he said as much. He said, what, you know, what is this going to be, a poetry reading or what? You know, we've got all these pundits, and it's like this kid's just come up to read his poem. And he was like completely dumbstruck by it. And he said, let me look. And he read Maharishi's poem. And it really like impressed him as to how good the poetry was. And he pushed forward. Actually, they're the same cast. There's Srivastava. So I don't know whether it was like to actually send the signal to Gurudev. We got another one of our lot who's really good at poetry. Anyway, whatever. That I interjected that. I shouldn't have done. But he read the poem. That was the first contact. You know, that Star Trek, First Contact. But that was first contact. That's pretty brazen. That's pretty overconfident. Then when he joined the ashram, he had nothing to do, so he pushed his way. He wanted to become a cleaner, and then he saw a pundit had taken some days off, and he said, "Oh, I'll go and read the letters to Gurudev." He was very, very pushy. He didn't wait till 2000 or 1995 to become pushy. He was pushy right from the start. And in a way, I don't think any of us would have learned the method that we had learned. I don't know that I wouldn't have learned to meditation. I don't know. I think I would, because I had a mystical girlfriend, and she would have forced it on me at some time. She had funny books that she read. Oh, I've got this book. Look at it, and she'd read bits out of it. So I think I would have got enticed somewhere down the line. But I think you got to hand it to the guy. He went worldwide. He infected people with a desire. Whether he's left a lot of people disenchanted, I think that's also true. I think because it was based on numbers, some people didn't get a qualitative gain. I like to think that I got a qualitative gain out of it. I don't turn on. I don't drink. I'm reasonably happy with life. My biggest worry now is not just my teeth; it's my kiln out here. Oh, bloody hell.
What are you baking in the kiln? Pottery.
Pots. She's made spoon rests. I mean, it's a proper pottery kiln, not porridge. Did you say porridge?
No, pottery.
Yeah. Okay, so there's spoon rests. I don't know what else she's been making. It's really nice to have somebody being creative around the house. I have to do a fair amount of kicking, soft shoes, to get her going. But honestly, when she gets going, it's really amazing. And it's really great to see. I put up a video recently of her fashioning a bird on the end of a stick in the kitchen. I came into the room and I thought, like, what? That like almost like a real bird. And I got out the phone and I made a short video. And, it's nice to have creativity going on. And I think we're talking new beginnings. What are those new beginnings? I think that a lot of us like creativity. But I think another thing we like is being nice to one another. And I think that's gone out the world. And I think we need to find a way. If I was like trying to get an agenda here, I would say that would be kind of a must. We really need to get people valuing each other. Well, I learned that in India. When I went to Rishikesh, when I went to Swargashram, we were all on a level. There were Christian, Muslim, I think he was Muslim, he came from Afghanistan. There were Hindu, there were non-believers. We were all on the same level. Swamis, sadhus, all on the same level. And I was gobsmacked that you could live so harmoniously amongst people. I know it was a holy village, but like there wasn't outbreaks of nonsense. Some people acted stupid.
I was much taken by your saying earlier that you like to talk to crazy people in the street. And
but it's inevitable when you live around here.
Yeah. Well, me too. I really enjoy, every kind of person, and very poor people and crazy people, and I find them really. There's something. There's something great in everybody, and probably particularly there's something great in people who don't have a lot because they're forced back onto themselves.
Do you know, I've found that when I've known people, and I knew this particular guy who's a bookshop owner, a bookseller, And he was obnoxious. He really was. You say there's good in everyone. Well, yeah, well, maybe. But he was obnoxious. He was really somebody you did. And I really wanted to buy a comic out of his shop, and he was charging a ridiculously high price. But I still went into the shop and looked around. And one day he was really nice. And I thought, he's changed. There's something different about him. He was like on the level. He was chatty. He was caring. And I hung out with him a while. And I realized what had happened. His mother had just died. And what you're saying is when people have less, there's something about them. And when somebody's bereaved, there's something about them. There's that leveling again. It's like something that they don't have actually makes them realize that they're not so exalted, or they're not such a so-and-so. And I mean, it was terrible to have to find that out that way. But I think it's true. I think when people have a sort of loss like that, it brings them down to earth, you know?
Yeah. There's a famous saying about that. You know, poverty makes saints and wealth makes monsters, something like that.
Never heard it.
One of the great poets.
Paul, before you go, could you show us covers of some of the books that you'd recommend or that we could buy? Or
you mean recommend what, my books or other people?
Yes.
I got a friend who writes very far out books. Well, we're talking about Gurudev, and we're talking about Maharishi. We're talking about roots of TM. That's the one. Oops, don't know. That's Maharishi's story. I'm quite pleased with that. I've revised it, and I'm quite pleased with that. I think it's a fair coverage of. So that's called Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, an inspired title. Then there's 108 discourses of Gurudev, and that's interesting. There's stuff that causes question, especially to women, you know, like their role in Indian society. Although they're highly respected and revered and they're seen as goddesses, they don't seem to get the same crack as guys. So it might send a few shudders, but
where do those 108 discourses come from? Who preserved them?
Put them together? Rameshwar Tiwari put them together out of ashram newspapers. They were originally called Upadesh Amrit. Okay, Upadesh means discourse. Amrit means nectar. So they were called Sri Shankaracharya Upadesh Amrit, which means the ambrosia or whatever sayings, discourses of Sri Shankaracharya. So they are authentic. They're not made up. I didn't kind of go, oh, I think I'll write a book about what he might have said. It's word for word right. Even if the grammar's poor, I haven't made a lot of mistakes in it because I've yet to get an Indian come back to me and say, oh, excuse me, with all due respect, you made a big boo-boo. It hasn't happened, you know. Perhaps they're just too polite, you know. Here's a funny book. This is, I called it Gurudev as presented by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. It was the book that Maharishi put together in 1951 with other stuff that I found. And I've done that with the biography of Gurudev, is that I took the Hindi one that he basically written himself, Gurudev had written it, and I sliced other things in that I came across, you know. So you won't read them elsewhere because they're all in here. I'm not very good at selling my own work. Roots of TM. For those of you who don't know, Is Judith still here? Judith Bork?
Yes, she just stepped out of her chair.
I can't see her name up. Anyway,
Judith left a good night in the chat. I think she's away.
Okay, two things to say about this. I was involved in a very high-profile capacity in a legal case between Maharishi Foundation and this is being recorded, isn't it? It might be good if you drop this bit, okay?
Okay, we'll turn it. We'll.
Can I make that? I'm not censoring you, but I think this might be better not.
No, we'll make that stipulation. We'll
Thank
cut
you.
it out.
Thank you. I was involved in a high-profile case between Maharishi Foundation and a teaching faculty, which was basically independent of the movement, and they were being prosecuted, and it was a very costly case. It was costing into the millions, and their lawyer phoned me and asked me my take on it. Well, you know, I blab. I just go, oh well, it's so and so and so and so, and I did that in an email, and he wrote back and said, would you mind joining our legal team as an expert witness? And I thought, oh, cool. You know, I don't know or care really. It's just an interesting gig to talk about the history of transcendental meditation. I didn't really see where it was going or anything like that. Anyway, they got me involved, and they got me to write a statement of the history of transcendental meditation, which it was quite fun and it was quite long. And afterwards, the movement then did a counterblast. Bevan Morris wrote it. And I thought, do you know what? They haven't got an awful lot to say. I was rather surprised because they'd done two such ones. The first one was I didn't think that it was serious. It seemed to say nothing about the case in hand. At least Bevan's seemed to be going towards saying something about the case in hand. But I didn't think it was very powerful. Did I say that powerfully enough? I didn't think it was very powerful. And I didn't think that they were going to win the case on the strength of marshalling their arguments. I really didn't. And it was going to a court in Fairfield, Iowa. And I was going to Morocco. And I was sort of saying, well, look, you know, you want me to come to Fairfield. That's a pretty big deal, but that would mean that I could go and see my family in the States. So that's cool. And we never finalized it. And I went to Morocco, and I suddenly realized that my computer wasn't set up to go online to the court. And it was like, I would have been subpoenaed. Okay, do you get that? I would have been airlifted out of Morocco and dumped into Fairfield. So that was like a little bit on my mind that things were going a bit odd. And then I got a message at some time that it wasn't going to happen in court. They were settling out of court. And whilst this was going on, I was thinking, do you know what? My essay to the judge would make a good book, you know? I wasn't being I wasn't thinking of a bestseller. I was just thinking it would make an interesting read. And I approached the lawyer, and he said, oh, well, yeah, but we'd have to ask the other side, meaning Maharishi Foundation. I thought, I don't want to ask their permission to do something. And I looked at what I'd written, and I thought, well, I could improve on that anyway. And I took the name Roots of TM from a little thing that I got online on my website. I'd already started a little story called Roots of TM. And I named it, and that's where the book came from. And the first people to get a copy of the book, guess who? The court. I mean, they bought a whole bundle. So I won in that respect, that I actually, my first sales were to the very court that I've been addressing. So personally, I don't know if you've got the same sort of sense of humor. I thought that was hilarious. The next thing was that.
But what was the basic argument that the court was trying to find out, that the people that your side was representing, what was the argument that they were making?
Ooh, deep waters.
Okay. We can turn the recording off.
I'd have to think that through before I talk that through. But basically, I then had a book to deal with. This.
Right.
And I basically, I don't know, I think I was corresponding with Judith Borg, and I said to her, oh, I know, she couldn't find my Maharishi book. That was it. She'd gone online to find my Maharishi book because she wanted to say that she liked it, or say that it was an okay book, whatever she wanted to say. And she said that I hadn't got a page for it on Facebook. Well, obviously I didn't have a Facebook page for it. I didn't have a Facebook page for anything. And I thought, oh, is that the way it's done? Because I know absolutely nothing. So I created a web page, a Facebook account for Roots of TM. And that's the whole genesis of where that particular Facebook group came from. You can blame or thank Judith Borg for suggesting to me that I needed to have a Facebook page for the Maharishi book, which I didn't do, but I did for the Roots of TM. And then people started talking, and people started to kind of like befriend each other, instead of like just kind of like making comments about the book, which is what they were supposed to be doing. They actually ended up like Facebook friending anybody who was on there and getting clusters. So you've got kind of 60 mutual friends, 120 mutual friends. It's quite funny. And I think essentially that this might have been part of what fed into new beginnings. So in a way, Judith Borg, unknowingly, was a stepping stone to this very event this evening. So her and Miguel, I don't know who else to blame. I'm looking through the names. Who can I pick on? No, I can't.
Stephen wants to ask a question from Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was basically just to say thank you very much. That was very informative, really awesome. But also, as a keen music fan, I wanted to know what the music you had playing at the beginning of the chat this evening about the tabla player.
Yeah,
so I can take note of it.
Calvin Singh.
Calvin Singh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Calvin Singh brought out an album called OK, and it was a Mercury Prize winner. And I think it's probably the best album, other than other albums, that's ever been made.
Cool. No, I appreciate that. Just anything that's Eastern just taps into me and just makes the brain go nuts. So I love it. So thank you.
He made a second album called OK, that's spelled OK, which is also very good. Huh?
It says okay.
Oh, good. but you see, what he did is he built on what the Beatles did back in the 60s. They introduced the world to Indian instruments via their music, as did the Yardbirds. We could get into a big discussion about the introduction of Indian music and the fact that Jack Bruce used the Veena to get his style for playing the bass. I mean, there was a kind of what we were talking about earlier. There was a melting point. There was a meeting point whereby India became very much a big part of things. And I think that lapsed for a great many years, Stephen, until Calvin came on the scene, and he revived it. in a way that nobody could have predicted. He was using samples, but he was a very, very skilled musician, and he brought in samples. And he went and got himself transcendental meditationized as well. More recently, he went up and went to Rajapita in where, I don't know where they call it, but some special holy place in Britain, to get himself
Aberdeen.
So, pardon?
It's Aberdeen.
No, this side of the border.
Rendlesham.
Might that sounds like true, but it's nice to know that that he went off and meditated. So yeah, but yeah, good. Thanks for that question.
Hey, look, Paul, this has been just a fabulous event and a fabulous session with you, and there's so much interesting information. And
we haven't covered very much, but we've had a good old yap. And
I think
you've not made me feel uncomfortable, and I thank you for that sincerely.
Well, that's a major. That's major.
Yeah. So
I don't think we make anyone feel uncomfortable.
Good. No, I saw Dana sweat though. I think you put him on his metal at times. But talking about that, Dana's communicated to me that he took the questions very well. He didn't say I take them very seriously, but he did take the questions seriously, and he is trying to answer the questions that he was asked related to what Swami's teaching, what they were teaching, and so forth. He's reaching out and trying to get answers for you. So well done for challenging him basically and getting him back into the fold, because I think he'd wandered off. I don't think he was very much interested in talking about Shankaracharyas and Swamis and that anymore. And I think it's reinvigorated his interest. That's just my perception.
No, that's great.
Yeah,
that's very good. Yeah, we sometimes give people a bit of a grilling, but we never. I don't think we ever sort of get aggressive with people. It's certainly not our aim. But I love what you said earlier about, part of the answer is just being together and
yes,
thinking together and hanging out together.
I think it is a big part of the answer. I think for me, meditation was largely, it kind of ticked a box. I then needed something to think about, and I also needed to make contact with people who were meditators. So I went along to the movement, and I found it really stuffy, middle class, and boring. And maybe one or two of the people, like Jerry Stovin, and particularly Jerry Stovin, I found were out of that category. He was like, he was vibrant, and he would tell stories about time in India with the Beatles and Donovan and that. And he was very real, and I really loved being with him. And otherwise, it was like a bit of a stuffy atmosphere. But that's what I went for, and that's what we're doing tonight. It's not exactly stuffy. Being with people who've all got their own opinions and probably very divergent opinions. It's great because we're not fighting, and we are sort of hoping to work things out, to get inspirations and that. And I feel inspired. I think Robert inspired me by challenging me with some of the things that he said. Delena's challenging me by kind of saying, yeah, what about Hawaiian beliefs? It's like, yeah, I mean, I think we all need our own newspaper or magazine. And for me, this is a shortcut, like sampling what people are saying, what people are moving. It's much easier than reading a magazine for me. I'm a bit lazy. This has been quite a kind of like cocktail of input, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, that's great. Well, Miguel is finally put his hand up.
I can see
Come
that,
on,
really.
Miguel.
Yeah, I maybe to resume, but it's a funny story, and I want to tell it as fast as I can. I found Paul's book biography on Maharishi in 1995. I was on a business trip in Manhattan, of all places, in Madison Avenue, and I had some time to kill, and I just had this impulse. I want to go to the street and feel the street and see the people. And I saw a bookshop, a big one, and I get this impulse. I have to go there. And right in front of it, the first thing I saw was Paul's book biography of Maharishi.
Was that the Portuguese translation?
No, it was in English because it was in New York. And
sorry.
Yeah, I bought it and I started reading. And for the next 3 days, while I was involved in all these business meetings and all this activity I was doing, at night I would go to the hotel and just read the book 2-3 hours nonstop because I was just so fascinated with it. And the next year, I went to, by some miraculous happenings, I went to TTC and Vlodrop, of all places. And I took the book with me because I wanted to reread it. And the TTC administrator of my first phase of TTC found out that I was reading the book, and I got in problem with him. So he didn't want me to pass to the second phase, and I actually had to threaten him because I knew him very well. I knew all these, all the dirty things that he did in Portugal. He was Portuguese. And I told him, no, you're going to let me go to phase 2. You're not going to stop me just because I'm reading a book that, by the way, everyone should read. It's a book that every meditator should read. So that was the beginning of my struggle with the TTC, with the TMO because of Paul's book as a teacher, right? My first struggle with TMO as a teacher, or beginning as a teacher. And then I left the movement in 2008. And then I had a few years in the desert. Everyone abandoned me. All my old colleagues and friends stopped talking with me. I was shunned. And so one day I found on the internet, I don't know how, the group Roots of TM. And I said, oh, it's Paul Mason. Let me go and take a look, see what I can learn. And to my surprise, I was thinking, it's going to be a discussion about books. And I found there was this old community talking with each other and sharing stories about their time in the movement. And some of those stories were not particularly very in the, let's say, the fold of the TMO narrative. And that was the beginning of this journey of all of us. We all met first in Roots of TM. We all became friends in Roots of TM. And it's true friendships. It's virtual friendship. Some are not virtual anymore because we met each other. But it's true friendship. And it's quite amazing how this ended like this, how we we met. And Roots of TM was the beginning of this journey that we're all in. And I'm very thankful to Paul for it, and I think we all are. All of us are grateful for he giving us this opportunity to talk with each other freely in Roots, and then from then, move on.
It was funny, wasn't it, Miguel? Because there was a like it didn't belong to me anymore. The group, it was my.
Yes, it took over you.
Everybody took over, and it was strange. It was a strange experience because it was, it was as if one's own house was turning into a public house.
Yes, it was the feeling. Yes,
it was very strange, and I could no longer call the shots. I had to ask, like, what do people want? And it got quite flowery at one point. We had like people putting kind of hearts and flowers at the ends of their posts, and that it got really quite spacey. I don't know if you remember that. It was totally out of hand. I completely lost the plot, you know.
And thank you for that.
Biddy, I'm thinking Paul may be wanting to get away. He's been going for 3.5 hours, but maybe we'll finish with Biddy.
As a fellow Brit, I just want to mention this with Paul there. I'm not really sure who you are, but because I don't do Facebook and stuff. But I've got a few little comments that I'd like to finish, that I'd like to say. I watched the Shadows of Paradise movie. Have you seen it, Paul?
Who's it by?
It's by this American guy, David somebody. What is it? Do you know, Delana? No, it's by this American guy who was raised in a TM family.
Right.
And I forget his name. And there's a lot of footage from India. He's a young man. He's probably in his 30s or so. 40s.
Can you give me the name of that again?
It's called Shadows of Paradise. It's a documentary and it's on YouTube.
The name rings a bell, but yeah, I have to own up. You say you're not quite sure who I am or what. I researched the story of Maharishi, which came out in Chile.
I've learned a bit tonight.
A long time ago. And since
Sebastian Lang created that documentary.
Right. Sebastian Lang, yeah. Let me finish, Paul, if you would, because I need to go eat. I haven't had much except a banana today. It's worth what I found the movie absolutely fascinating because there was a lot of footage from India. He's got a kind of a love affair going with the Indian railways. There's a lot of footage of the railways, but towards the end of the movie, and he covers all kinds of things to do with India and American involvement in TM and everything. He started to have some questions about the organization and what have you. That's what prompted him to make the film. Towards the end of the film, he talks about his urge to go see Gurudev's cave.
I've heard about that bit, yes.
And I found it absolutely fascinating. I'm a total nature buff, and my heritage are Celts, but a little bit more about that. So anyway, he went to these mountains with an unpronounceable name in the middle of India where the cave was. And it's worth watching the movie just to see the last few minutes about going to the cave. It hit me how incredibly remote it is. Incredibly remote. And my first thought was, like you said, where did he get his sandwiches? You know, how did he eat? And I read somewhere else that he existed on sprouted gram.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know if you wrote that or somebody wrote that. So having done raw foods in the past and been a total vegan on raw foods, I could understand how he could survive on that. But it still it just had an incredible impact somehow, that particular cave and its location, overlooking this huge valley and everything. So in relation to what you were saying, Delana, I hadn't really thought about Gurudev's connection with nature, or him being a sort of a foresty person. I hadn't really thought about that because I didn't know that much from, through Maharishi about him really, except for the Little Holy Tradition book. But the Celts, the ancient Celts, were a completely rural people, rustic people. And for them, the gods were the clouds, the mountains, the rainfall, the trees. Everything was speaking to them. And I can really relate to that, especially as I've aged. It becomes very clear to me, my heritage. So just want to mention those two things. And so nature was their gods in different forms. And I want to say this again, Brian. I just think at some point it would be so interesting to have a session to hear how people have, if and how they've moved on, and what they've found that works for them. I'm very interested in that. Yeah. Yeah. So
absolutely, that's what we're about. Absolutely. So thank you, Biddy, and much appreciated. We do want to finish. Paul Muller, if you have one quick comment. Otherwise, we want to let Paul Mason get away.
Yes, I just had a little tidbit that might be able to help Paul pass his supernatural hang-up there. I have studied comparative religion on PhD level, and I always use this story. You know, you can go to spiritual meeting with a lot of women who need some hobby and the whole New Age fluffy thing. But I tell them a hardcore story about how you survive in Greenland. If you're a tribe of Eskimos haven't eaten for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, your shaman better be able to know his stuff. Because the only chance of surviving is if he uses his knowledge and technique to go to spirit worlds and find out, and the spirit tell him where the muscus oxes are, and there's 360 degrees possibility, and you have to say the right direction. If they don't get those animals, they will all die. So it's not some strange supernatural thing. It's if you want to survive in the wild nature, Siberia, Greenland, or the jungle, you need help from those powers. Like the lady just before said, you need close contact with all the elements and trees and animals. So it's not some strange mysterious thing. It's just a survival thing. And another example is two Danish brothers who are, one is a top scientist researching DNA and the old Indians and 10,000 years old, and his brother is a museum man also. They lived for a period as what you call it, out in Siberian wilderness, as surviving as hunters. They found the same thing. It's possible to survive in that harsh environment if you don't make offerings to the powers. Only after they started making those offerings, they were able to catch those animals and get in connection with them and be allowed to catch them. So that might be help.
No, it's very helpful. I got two responses on that. That when Gurudev initially left home, he was known to make offering to the Ganga when he got some milk. So he was doing this when he was 9 years old, before he got a guru. He was taking that mentality. I have a friend who's a teacher of shamanism. He lives here in Cornwall. And I said earlier that I don't know people who meditate, but I forgot that I know Chris Lustchow, and he is he's the exceptional person, because he's one of these people that you're talking about who can actually tune into himself and tune into seemingly other dimensions and be aware in a way which is very, very unusual. And it's very beautiful to talk with him sometimes, because the familiarity that one gets with the transcendental makes one more intuitive. I don't know about contacting spirits, but I know about intuition, and I really work always on intuition, a little bit of mental stuff, but always on intuition. And talking with Chris it's like, oh, that's shamanism. It's like, oh, really? And it's really fascinating, like you're presenting, is that there are other disciplines, other traditions which are outside of India and that don't contain the same language, but contain the same elements. And I appreciate you mentioning that.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, both Pauls. And great talk, great session, great knowledge, great information, and great stamina. Staying with us for 3.5 hours.
I could have done it for longer. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's been really a pleasure for us.
I'm not fading. My flowers are not fading yet. Right. So,
well, phenomenal.
Thank you all for having me and for sharing your time with me. I really appreciate it. And now I've got to go and have a look at the kiln, see what's going on.
Right, that error message.
Yeah. But it was a good introduction that Kathy was able to come and say hi. I don't like the idea that you think that I live in a bubble. It's like, I live with problems, real problems.
Well, tomorrow you can go out on the street and talk with some crazy people and some homeless people.
Yeah, but I get on with them better, easier than other people. They'll sidle up at a bus stop and you think, oh, wow, you're a real weirdo. And you get on with them. It's like, why is that?
Me too.
Yeah,
me too.
Yeah, perhaps if we're a bit weirder than we think. I shouldn't have said that.
Anyway. We're all peculiar in our own particular way.
Must be. Must be. Well, thank you all, I say again. And look forward to seeing you again one day. Yeah.
See you, Paul. Yeah, hopefully not too long. Tremendous.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Thank you. Nice to have you here, David.
Yeah.
Anybody's welcome to sit around and chat for a few minutes.
I'm so hungry.
So,
go and eat. A banana.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. I'm just really interested to hear how everybody is how their lives have developed and what they've turned to. And, like Delena says, she does Ishwadevata, and I know other people in Fairfield who do. I don't know anything about it. I'm just interested to know about different modalities and what's working for them. And I thought a session where people just had a few minutes each, not one session per person, but where everybody has a little time or whatever would be really, really, for me, that would be very interesting.
Biddy, I brought up that request too.
Yeah.
I have mentioned that to Brian for a few weeks, and so maybe we can do that. I actually have to go, but I just want to apologize for dominating the wrap. I wasn't even going to really come today because I don't know why. And then all of a sudden I was taking all of the time. But anyway.
No. You did well, Delina. Thank you.
You did well.
Very well.
I don't know. I mean, I have his book on TM, but I don't have Discourses of Gurudev. I have He Can Light Up.
Fundamental.
Yeah, but I don't have the biography of Gurudev or the Roots of TM. And on Amazon, there's 2 of his books, but the other ones I think you buy directly.
Yeah, look at the screen.
Yeah, where did you get that one from?
Amazon.
Okay, well, on
it's
Amazon,
3 volumes. Yeah.
On Amazon, I'm showing Roots of TM and the Maharishi, which I already have. But I want this. Let me see that one again that you had, Miguel.
This is the 108 Discourse of Gurudev, and there's 2 more books.
Okay, I don't see that one on Amazon.
Yeah, it is. I bought it on Amazon. I'm actually rereading and taking notes, as you can see.
Okay, well.
Anyway. He also wrote a very fascinating book on the Beatles and their time in India and Maharishi. It's fabulous.
What's so funny about that guy is he's so quirky and free-spirited. And
yes.
He's not an academician, but he's brilliant. I mean, he breaks all the bounds. You can see why he's been handed the project cosmically, because he doesn't think he's cosmic. I mean, the guy's just wild.
Yeah, he's really,
yeah,
he's great. He's really.
He has an innocence. He comes across with an innocence. It's just Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So true.
Ananda had an interesting question that I kept meaning to post him, which was about the amulet, and I never got to.
Oh yeah, somebody put that in, Delana. Yeah.
It was Ananda, yeah. But
Delina.
Yeah.
This is another book. It's really, really good.
The Beatles, I can't see it. The Beatles what?
Okay, The Beatles, Drugs, Mysticism, and India. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Transcendental Meditation, J. Gurudev Om.
And who wrote that one?
Paul Mason.
Oh, so he's written quite a few.
Yeah, what he did is he collected all the interviews and newspaper articles, etc., that the Beatles talk about, India, mysticism, drugs, and how it's related to each other, and it's fabulous. I read it when I was during the lockdown on COVID, so it was a very good book to read that time.
What's the name of the book again, Miguel? What's the name?
It also mentioned other musicians who did the TM. It's very, very good. It's called The Beatles. I can send you afterwards. Drugs, Mysticism, and India. Okay. And then subtitle, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Transcendental Meditation, Jai Gurudeva Om.
Did you get the feeling that he was holding back on talking about the more controversial things? Just
and it has beautiful photos. It's like amazing with photos, beautiful photos.
Yeah, he was certainly holding back on talking about anything criticizing Maharishi.
But it should be interesting to pump his brain sometime and get him to divulge all the stuff that he.
Privately, he talks differently than.
Yeah. I mean, because of course we all want to know all the dirt possible, right? So that the house can be clean. I mean, I always think I've heard it all, but I don't know if there's ever going to be an end to it.
I wonder if he knows.
But he has a very impartial. He wants to be impartial. He doesn't want to be involved in politics.
No. Yeah.
Right? So he doesn't in public. Privately with me, he talks about everything, but like in public, he doesn't because he wants to have that position where he's impartial.
I'm going to pause recording and we can